Right, and welcome. We're live. Welcome, Jake, to the podcast. Thank you very much for agreeing to come on. And yeah, thank you very much. So we've just been speaking off camera and catching up and going through everything with a fine tooth comb, and then realised we better press record because because it kind of runs away and go live. So for those that sort of don't know who you are or what you do, and what your sort of role is in the world, as it's as we say at this point in time. Introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are, what you do, and what you're about, basically.
Oh, I've got a very small and insignificant role in the world, but but I make the most of it. I try to make the most of it anyway. So Jake Swindells, I've worn many hats in the past. I know people say, who are you? But I think I'm still trying to figure that one out. So I've
we all are.
been on a bit of a journey. So initially, I went into a pretty serious career, and I thought I was going to be there for 30 years, and then sort of hit 30, 32, and decided to bin it off and go in a completely different direction. So yeah, I'm not sure about that, but we'll probably get into the detail of that a little bit longer. But yeah, I live in Scotland. So I do. I'm very much an outdoorsman. I was born and brought up in the southwest of Scotland, so I spend a lot of time outdoors. Still do. Any adventure, really. That's really what floats my boat. So yes, and I think the biggest adventure is probably being a dad, which I never thought would actually happen. It was one of those things that just didn't. It wasn't on the radar, and then all of a sudden it was, and then 8
And
years
then
in, I'm
your whole life changes overnight to the point where all your priorities that were at the top of the list are now at the bottom of the list, and all the priorities
yeah,
that you didn't think would be there are now back up at the
yeah,
top. Yeah, been
yeah.
there, topsy turvy.
And I thought I was tired before. I mean, but I've got to give Toby a shout out on this. I've got a pal with. I've actually lost count how many kids he's got. 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. But yeah,
don't
I thought
don't envy that.
no, I thought I was tired, but it changes everything, doesn't it?
It does, and it's one of those things. I was speaking with um, Jackson. He's a modern masculinity coach, and I forgot to kind of touch on this with him in terms of the fact that when I think one of the biggest things for a man in his life, and nobody ever sort of told me this, and nobody ever sort of reiterated the importance of it, is as soon as you become a father, as soon as you become a dad, you grow the fuck up. You become that man, and you have to be.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's such an important thing.
yeah.
So yeah, I commend you on that. So in terms of your adventuring, your outdoors, man, and it's massive on my priority list. So whenever I'm feeling sort of a bit down or a bit not right or had enough, and you stop the world and you want to get off, the first thing I do is get outside in nature. There's a
Mm.
place I love to go that's near us that's like one of the oldest woodlands. It was back there. In fact, the Cromwellians used to march through that woodland and ended up in a battle just on a bridge beyond it. And I think from my experience, I've lived in the States, I've lived in Africa. England is sort of, or England, Scotland, the UK in general, sort of suffers from a bit of um yeah, I'm trying to find the words to sort of say it's probably lost its connection a lot with the outdoors, even though we've kind of got an abundance of jewels. We've got like the Lake
Mm.
District, we've got the New Forest, we've got the Outer Hebrides. If I regularly show, I've been kayaking up there with my sea kayaking with my dad up in the Outer Hebrides, and you show somebody a picture, people would think it's in the Caribbean. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, it's fucking -6 degrees of freezing
Temperature slightly
cold.
different.
But like we have such an abundance of these beautiful outdoor spaces, but we kind of have lost that that adventure element of sort of that connection with it, if that makes sense. Everything becomes commercialized. It's like cat bells in the Lake District. Great walk, but
yeah,
it's such a
yeah,
commercialized walk on a path that's boring, in my opinion.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I completely agree. I think the problem we have in the UK is we're never very far away from somewhere. So you can,
mm,
you wherever you stood, the nearest house is probably going to be within 5 miles of you, and that's in a very
yeah,
remote place as well. And as well with the technology and transport, developments in transport, the places are so much more accessible now as well. So there isn't really there aren't really many wild places left to be able to go and just sort of have some mental space and chill out, because you'll go somewhere. I mean, I've done it in the past. I've gone somewhere. I've hiked into somewhere or mountain biked into somewhere, and when you get there, there's a lot of people with like a family tent there. And it's like, Jesus. I've been planning this for 6 months, and somebody's just driven up to the track on the other side of the hill. But it's that there aren't really any wild places left, so you've got to do your best. But it's not to say you can't still have an adventure. I've got a pal who's
yeah,
a pilot, and you've got to sort of make the adventure. I think one of the things that we've been planning as well is a plane trip over to Barra, which is one of the little islands in the Outer Hebrides. So what we're going to do, we're going
mm,
to get the very light fishing gear. A couple of us are going to jump in the Super Cub, fly over to Barra, land on the beach, camp under the wing. Have a beach fire, fish fish over there, and fly back the next day. It's just my mindset now is, if I get a day or two off, I don't think, right, I'm going to go for a walk, in the fields at the back of the house. I'm thinking, what can I do? Genuinely, what can I do
yeah.
that nobody else is doing? And then
Eh,
more recently, I've started to film these as well. So, that's kind of
yeah.
leading
Well,
me on to
you're launching your Westcapades YouTube channel, aren't you? I think you said the first episode
yeah.
is dropping when?
21st of October, so really not far away now. I'm pretty excited for it. I've been thinking about it for quite a number of years now, but I've never had the capacity. I mean, I'm a technophobe. I don't have the equipment. I don't have the patience or the ability to learn how to edit. But the I've got a pal, GD Media, Gareth Davis Media. I've got to give him a shout out. Absolutely top
Yeah,
bloke.
yeah.
Him and his partner, Rich, not civil partner. I mean business partner. He'll make sure I clarify that one. Um, yeah, they're doing an awful lot of the work for me, so I'm cheating a bit. But 21st of October, Westcapades on YouTube. I've been on Instagram for quite a while, so you can see a lot of the ridiculousness that goes on there. But looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's obviously I've looked through all your content and whatnot, and we kind of got introduced through a mutual friend, it, and it's one of those where I've not sort of come across a UK based sort of there's always been the outdoor boys and like one of my biggest heroes is Ed Stafford. I've mentioned him on multiple episodes of this podcasting. Like if you're talking about bushcraft and survival, he's, in my opinion, the goat. Like he's if that's what you're interested in, you won't go far wrong if you try and emulate in terms of what he's done, and it's never about sort of the clout. It's always about the adventure. And I had Adrian on, who's a bushcraft survival and outdoors. He's a master. I'm gonna butcher this. He's a master medicinal herbalist. I think that's right. But he did that for 30 odd years, and what I've always found with people that do spend a lot of time adventuring and outdoors like you do, without detriment to anybody else, they're the best sorts of people. If that makes sense, in terms of the fact they're a lot, they just tend to be more grounded, more matter of fact. There's less of the first world dramas. It's just sort of get on and get done. If there's a problem, let's solve it. Or we get around it and overcome it. And it just seems to be that I personally believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's that relationship between us as humans and nature, which sort of helps that sort of personality flourish, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and it helps to have like-minded people around you as well. I'm exceptionally lucky, with balancing sort of family life, being a dad, and I still get to go out and adventure a lot more than other dads probably do. So I'm lucky in that way, but also I've surrounded myself with very similar or like-minded people, and that helps as well. You've got a very sort of the inner circle, I call it. And I'm very happy, for newer people in the outer circle, but the inner circle is a real core of people who you can phone up and say, right, are you off? Are you off Monday, Tuesday next week or something like that? Yeah, I am. Right, what are we doing? And it's
Yeah.
just yeah, it's like being normal. I'm not saying I'm abnormal. Well, probably somebody would say I'm abnormal, but but I don't like to do normal. Whatever I do, I like to do
No.
it. Extra.
Yeah.
I like
It's
it.
it. Well, if life's there for living, and
Mm,
and ultimately, I think one of the things coming from the outside looking in, because I've never really done. I've done when I was younger. I did my fair share of rabbit hunting. The farmer used to pay us to go and get the rabbits off his land because the class is a pest and a vermin. And it was only with like a 12-foot-pound air rifle. It wasn't anything spectacular. And everyone that you sometimes hit, it wouldn't kill it anyway, because
mhm,
there wasn't the power there. And then I kind of, obviously, I moved over to the States, fired every single gun that you could possibly imagine because it was fucking amazing. But never really got the chance to do the sort of outdoorsy thing over there because I was young and the job that I
mm,
was doing. And then coming back to the UK, I think one of the biggest things is that adventure is all well and good. And I think some people think in terms of fitness and in terms of getting out, it's there's a big difference from going a walk in your local woodland to, for instance, climbing Helvellyn. Now, I've noticed this year a lot that, Snowdonia, there's been multiple deaths up in Snowdonia and up in the Lake District from people
mm.
that probably shouldn't be on the mountain, if that makes sense, and shouldn't be doing it. And fair, this is not a slight on them, and fair play in terms of, and there's been experienced people that have died as well.
Mm.
But I think um, that the sort of surge in outdoor influences that aren't doing it the right way and that aren't doing the proper practices and taking the proper precautions to warn the public.
Mm.
Do you think that's sort of a detriment to the opinion of sort of outdoor life?
Well, kind of. I think COVID was a big thing where this was concerned as well. A lot of people started getting outdoors and going to places where they wouldn't normally. I started following an account. It was about 2 weeks back, where this person, I won't say who they are. Like yourself, you'll click on something, you'll see an outdoor account, somebody going out doing something interesting. You'll just follow it. The more I watched, the more I thought, this is utter shit. This is awful. Um, but then you can actually see, because some people. I mean, I'm a massive advocate of people getting outdoors and having new
Yeah.
experiences. Those who are in cities and towns, getting out to the countryside, learning and understanding a bit more. But for someone like that has a little bit of experience to go online as a creator and say this is how you do this and this is how you do that, it's very easy because you've got the iPhone, you've got the microphone, you've got
Yeah.
the access to the internet, and it takes off, and you think that is that's shocking. They should not be doing that. They shouldn't be where they are for a start.
Mm.
It's just, yeah, it blows my mind sometimes, but I think a little bit of knowledge can be quite dangerous sometimes. But I suppose that goes with in any arena.
Yeah, and that's I completely agree. I myself have got me and my daughter into situations where I've been a lot more worried than what she sees. And I think, you know, don't get me wrong, it's never sort of threat to life. But for instance, we did like one of my favorite places in the world is Buttermere. Because it's gorgeous. You've got Fleetwood Park, you've got High Style, Haystacks, all these sort of peaks around you, and it's absolutely glorious. And we did a 2-day, and we did a wild camp up there, which is one of our favorite things to do. And we did High Style. I figured, as you always do at the start of an adventure, you think, right, well, if we do the hard bit first, then it's all downhill from there. It's all easy. And then you're halfway through the hard bit. You think, fucking hell, I wish I'd have done it the other way around. So we were halfway up, and don't get me wrong, it is a difficult scramble and it's a difficult climb. But it got to the point where it's like, we've got the packs on as well because we're camping, and it is 20 odd kilos. And I'm thinking, this is, I'm not in my comfort zone here. And, my comfort zone is quite a wide array, but I'm out of my comfort zone and I don't like it. And I think that sort of lack of knowledge from somebody that does get out quite a bit and does go adventuring, for these people that are just sort of the social media, at the age of social media, so to speak, saying, get up, get out. It's really good from a motivational aspect. But at the same time, there's that caveat of you've got to be careful and you've got to, where, I've seen people climbing up and down mountains in shorts and like Yeezys, where you think, where's your boots? Because when you roll your ankle, because a lot of it's scrambling, your boot you can tie up and support that ankle properly. That's and you're not going to get blisters and you're not going to stub your toes and the grip is better and you're not going to slip on these rocks. Nobody's telling them what boots to wear. They're just saying get out.
It's bizarre, and I commend them for getting out and doing it, and we've done a night shift in Chester, and then we've gone straight 7 o'clock in the morning, no sleep, obviously, straight over to North Wales, Cribgoch, the Snowdon Horseshoe, a knife edge ridge in really, really poor weather, and then you get to the top of Snowdon, and there's somebody there in shorts, a tracky top, and trainers with a carrier bag with a couple of tinnies in.
And that's it. And don't get me wrong, that might work sort of 50% of the time, but that other 50% where the weather changes and people get caught out, and then it's down to mountain rescue, and God bless them. The fact that they're all volunteers. More.
Well, you're risking other people's lives then as well, aren't you? So
that's it. And the thing is like, it's not a rescue as in like an ambulance turns up and they put you in the ambulance and then they drive you to a hospital. It might be 5, 6, 7, 8 hour rescues, in terms of they've got to get, they don't just fly a helicopter up there and then winch you down and winch you up. It's a team of people that have to go up and then carry your ass down. So I think what that was leading me into was the sort of education element. I see a massive lack of this in at sort of school level, and I think I'd like to know your opinion in terms of bringing more of this sort of element into schools.
It's, I mean, it's quite fortuitous, really, because in Scotland anyway, there's an MSP that's trying to introduce the outdoor education bill, which is going through at the minute. The organisation I work for at the minute, we have an interest in anything rural, whether it's a burst for rural society or whether it's a positive step. So we look at legislation, proposed legislation that's coming through. We try to influence that for the good of rural Scotland. It's a UK-wide organisation, but I'm based in Scotland. So one of the MSPs up here has introduced the outdoor education bill, and it's come up against a brick wall. And for me, it's absolutely vital to get this bill through. I think it segregates. I think P5 to P4 or P5 to 7 up here. I'm not sure what the conversion is for England, what year that is. So basically, the 2 or 3 years prior to going to high school,
Yeah,
you should be having a number of days out in the countryside and in the wilderness. And it's like I was in Cubs and Scouts and Venture Scouts, and that introduced
yeah,
me to
yeah. That was
camping. Duke of Edinburgh, and it lights a fire and it prepares you for later in life. And even if you never go out to the wilds again, you learn things that you can take through your life, no matter where you are.
100%. That I know for a fact that my daughter's learnt that sort of mental toughness, that mental resilience from being out. She's not learnt it from being in a classroom, and it's
Mm.
not an academic skill that can be taught. It's just through sheer experience, and that
Yeah,
experience came from we did a Scarfell Pike, so we did an overnight camp, um, and then summited Scarfell, and it was nice enough weather. But then on the way down from Scarfell back to Seathwaite, the weather changed as it does in the Lake
yeah,
Districts. You can't
yeah,
can never set your watch by the weather, and it was sideways rain. Honestly, winds must have been up to 40 mile an hour easy, and it was freezing cold. You've got the big packs on. Everything then becomes wet, so it becomes heavier.
mm,
And it got to the point where I was thinking, even I might not make this. Even like
yeah,
we've got about an hour and a half left, and I'm like, I've probably got 40 good minutes left in me. Other than that, I don't know. I don't know what goes beyond that.
yeah,
And she got upset, and I said, look, cry all you want, but we've got to just put one foot in front of the other. Keep on going. You can be
yeah,
all upset, you can blub your heart out, but just keep on putting one foot in front of the other. And she
yeah,
she was absolutely unbelievable. Like she surprised me, and we got back. We got in the car, heated seats on, stripped off, and we're freezing like drowned rats. And she looked at me with the biggest fucking grin on her face and the biggest smile on her face, and all the words she said, "I did it."
yeah,
And it was like that lesson in life, I couldn't have taught her that.
yeah,
Nobody with any letters or numbers
yeah,
after the name could have taught her that. That was purely that experience, and she
yeah,
will carry that and still does throughout
mhm,
every aspect of her life.
yeah. And
Um,
she'll remember that. She'll come up against something
mm,
in life, and it'll seem like an awfully long road. But one of the things I tend to tell people is just chip away. Just bit by bit by bit. And if you look at an obstacle in front of you, whether it's a false summit, whether it's whether it's a document that you've got to get finished by a certain time, or whether it's a tax return or whatever, just chip away at it, because the more you do,
mm.
the less is left. And then all of a sudden it'll be done, and you'll be thinking, well, that actually wasn't that fucking bad, was it?
Yeah, and that's it. I think that's the big thing with sort of going outdoors is that anybody at home now that's thinking, "Oh, I'm unfit," or I don't know what I'm doing. Just go to your local woodland. You like you said,
Mm,
you're probably no more than five. You definitely no more than half an hour away from your local woodland.
mm,
Just get out and go for a walk, and especially, don't get me wrong, I hate going out in rain. Rain is the worst, unless it's warm rain. But even then, I don't like rain. I like dry weather, but it doesn't matter temperature. But if you get out, like this morning, I got out walk the dog, and obviously with it being mushroom season at the minute, and I love going hunting. There's honey fungus galore everywhere, and I found one of my favorite mushrooms that I've never found actually in the woodland that I go to, which was black earth tongue. I've not seen it before, and it's so it's and it sounds crazy to somebody that doesn't maybe go out, but it's like me seeing that this morning was like, oh yeah, a little win for the day, brilliant,
yeah,
it just perks me up every time. Um,
yeah,
and I challenge anybody that's sort of umming and ahhing, like you said, chip away at it. Just take that first little step. Just get
mhm,
out, do 20 minutes, and you'll
yeah,
feel better.
yeah,
100% you'll feel better. Um,
yeah.
why do you think that sort of bill's coming up against sort of a brick wall, though? Do you think it's knowledge?
Um, I, I think partly finance. Any bill that
Okay.
is introduced costs money to put into practice. Partly actually because obviously we've got the SNP in power up here. It's a Tory bill that's been proposed, and predominantly, if the Tories up here say
Yeah.
something, then the SLP say some, the complete opposite. And we unfortunately we do have that kind of relationship. There isn't much love lost up here. But I think, well, I mean, my organisation certainly gave it some support online and social media. And I think there may be a little bit of chink of light coming through where that's concerned, but I think it's just so vital to get that over the line.
Yeah, and I can see that. I get frustrated with a similar thing, and not necessarily in terms of the the bill that you're saying, or anything to do with sort of the countryside or anything. It's when, and I discussed this with Tom Pickup, who's a Reform UK politician, and it's most people, and I'd say 95% of people are centralists. Like, I think we discussed
Mm.
this just before we started in terms of, it's the far right and the far left are only speaking to probably 10% of the population in reality. And the rest of us are in the middle, sort of seeing the good bits from each end and then
Yeah,
also seeing the negative bits from each end. And I think that what you that microcosm that you sort of shine a light on there in terms of for the greater good, because of party politics gets sort of shunned, and the countryside and rewilding areas and conservation, that's probably one of the first things that gets sort of cast aside and cast asunder, because it all then comes down to finance and money, and
yeah,
people talk about like that they are now immigration and energy and bills and council tax and this, that, the other, and not once, especially in England and whatnot, as the even even the even the Green Party, who are meant to be massive supporters of countryside and rewilding areas and conservation. All I've heard from them is how bad Nigel Farage is and how how horrible the wealthy people are in this country. When in
yeah.
fact, it's like, well, no, stand for what you stand for,
The,
if that
the
makes
the Green
sense.
Party, are extremely damaging for the countryside. There's this rhetoric about let's rewild Britain, let's get reforest, which is fine. We need more trees. There's no argument there. But to leave our countryside to its own devices after the changes we've made to it over the centuries is biodiversity suicide.
This episode is brought to you by Vanavasa Coffee. Since going caffeine free, I've realised how hard it is to find a genuinely good decaf coffee. Most of them taste flat, weak, or like they're just there to tick a box for the few of us that don't want or need that caffeine hit. But I still love coffee. The morning ritual, the warmth, the silence that comes with that first sip. And that's how I came across Vanavasa Coffee. A brand inspired by the wilderness, built around presence, purpose and balance. Their coffees are grown all over the world and roasted right here in the UK. Each blend tells a story. I've partnered with Vanavasa Coffee because it's about more than caffeine. It's about connection and the ritual. Right now, they're inviting a small group to join before they launch. You can register your interest and get 15% off your first order by visiting cutthest.com/sponsors and clicking on Vanavasa Coffee. That's cutthest.com/sponsors and clicking on Vanavasa Coffee.
Side. We
Yeah.
we need to manage our environment, and what the Greens want to do is basically kick out any big landowners. Stop shooting sports, which brings in. I mean, shooting itself. Is so good for biodiversity because we control predators. The management on grouse moors, for instance, a lot of people think that it's just a case of tough shooting expensive birds. It's so much bigger than that because the predation control that goes on grouse moors. Yes, the byproduct is more grouse, but also wading birds, lapwings, things like that. There are far more red listed species on managed grouse moors than there are on places that green supporters have rewilded. It's turned to rank heather where nothing can live.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's an
you
awful lot
see, it
more to it.
becomes almost like like a pretty desert. It doesn't have to be sand. It just becomes dead, if that makes sense. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's one thing that it's always frustrated me, is the fact that humans in general feel like that they can meddle and play God. And
Mm,
then when it starts going wrong, go, oh, fuck it, we'll leave it to itself. It'll sort itself out. When in fact, it's like,
yeah.
it's almost like getting a chip on fire and thinking, oh yeah, that'll die down. No, it fucking won't. It'll get worse. And I,
Yeah.
I had to explain it to my daughter. We recently went and, I say recently, was it this year? I think it was. We did Lud's Church in the Peak District, which is an amazing place. And we were walking through the woodland, and they were doing a lot of culling of the trees.
Mm,
And my daughter asked the question of, like, why are they cutting the trees down? They should just leave the trees alone. And the fact that, if they didn't cut where they cut, then all these trees would become diseased, and all these trees in time would end up dying, and then there'd be no more forest around here, and that's it.
mm,
They have to kind of, it's almost being cruel to be kind. And it's same, like I think I've mentioned on previous podcasts, I lived in Africa for a time. The elephant cull that goes on over there, people don't know about it. They don't see it. People see these elephants and think they're endangered. You know, I've been in the back of a pickup truck, on a road from Maun to Kasangula, which is in Botswana, for about 2.5 hours, whilst I watch countless elephants cross the road.
mm.
And anybody that tells me elephants are endangered, I call them a liar, because I've been there and
Mhm.
I've seen it for myself. And
Yeah.
there's an article been released recently about like the super herds that are making the resurgence. The amount of damage that these elephants do, because they're almost left unchecked to an extent.
Yeah.
And it's not just damage to human stuff and human farms and this, that. It's damage to other wildlife's habitat.
Yeah. Trampling
That then
and I
puts
mean
them at, yeah.
they've got to eat, haven't they? And they're a big beast, and there's plenty of them.
Oh yeah.
It's this whole management thing is what people don't see. People quite often say to me, "Oh, well, shooting animals should stop. It's barbaric. It's a blood sport." It's not a sport. It's a management technique,
No.
and the Scottish government actually are instructing deer hunters to shoot 50,000 deer more every year from now on because
Wow.
of the damage to trees. So we're planting trees
Wow.
up here like there's no tomorrow, but then they're getting eaten. And like Brewdog, I mean,
Yeah.
a case an example. Brewdog bought an estate up here. They said, "Oh, that's it. We're going to solve the world's problems. We're going to cover it in trees." What they didn't know and didn't understand in their utter ignorance is that that land was not suitable for planting trees. It's not suitable for an
Right.
awful lot of things. So they've covered it in trees. Public money, by the way, grants, funds, millions of pounds of public money. They've, in their wisdom, planted all these trees, and I think it's something like 50% of the trees have actually died. So but not
Wow.
only that, they moved. It was a sporting estate. There were, I think, 6 gamekeepers on there that were bringing money into the local economy. They were running a shoot. They were controlling the biodiversity. They were controlling predators. So, red listed species were on the rise. And they basically moved in there with their green ideas, fired the keepers, stopped the sporting estate from going on, and
Operating. Yeah.
then replanted all these trees. Half of them died, and now the other week, just a couple of weeks back, they've sold the estate and buggered off again. They've just fucking ruined it. So
And
these
it's
these
that
are these are the
I
green
I
ideologists that.
Yeah, I kind of see it quite a lot, and I think it's almost like a culture thing. And now that you've sort of explained it from your perspective, because obviously I'm not, as much as I like to get outdoors, and I would class myself as a bit of an adventurer. I'm nowhere near well educated enough to even talk about sort of the management in this country. I can only say what I've seen in different ones, but that what I've seen a rise of, and don't get me wrong, there is people in these industries and in these sort of communities that are 100% true, and they've been there from start to finish. But I've seen it now with Christianity. I've seen it previously with other things, but almost that altruistic virtue signaling, sort of, look how good we are, we're amazing, and it's almost it, it's like that age old. There's a meme actually, but it goes all the way back to sort of the Bible, and there's a story, and I'll touch on it in a minute. Is there's this guy giving a homeless man £50, but then he's also at once, make sure that camera's pointing at me, and make sure that you get this angle, and
Yeah.
make sure you get that angle, and make sure that you get how sad this this
Yeah.
homeless man is, whilst I give him this £50. And don't get me wrong, the homeless man now has £50. That's a good thing to an extent. Maybe not in a homeless man, because I'll explain why in a minute. But it's that sort of, you're not doing that from a charitable, good place. You're doing it from a
It's
purely selfish, altruistic
yeah.
place. And the thing is the damage caused is that £50 that homeless man might go and buy some drugs or whatever, and then overdose and die. And
Mm.
this person that's give £50 is, to the outside world, oh, I might do that. I might go and do that because look what he's done. And it's just that
Yeah.
snowball effect of, like, you're not seeing the true issue at heart. It's not the
Yeah.
fact that this man has no money. It's the fact that we as a society ignore this homeless man. And that's sort
Yeah.
of what I can see happening in terms of the wild. Is they might have
Yeah.
gone into it with good intentions,
Yeah.
but with, if you match good intentions with no fucking knowledge, the outcome's always
Yeah.
going to be pretty
Well,
bleak.
I'll tell you what the outcome is millions of pounds worth of wasted public money, and at least 6 families from the gamekeepers that were kicked off the estate having to move house, because with the gamekeeper, the house is normally tied to the estate. So you've got children in
Yeah,
local
yeah, yeah.
schools, you've got partners that might work in in local offices or shops or wherever. And that's, even those 6 people and 6 families are huge for that very small community. So they're now homeless because of an ideologist
Mm.
moving into somewhere and thinking that they're going to fix the world, in no time. So we're looking at rural depopulation, and that this is something that we are doing our damnedest to try to solve and stop from happening. But then on the other hand, we're allowing people like the owners of Brewdog to move in and just desecrate a whole area, have some fun with it, and think, oh well, that's not fucking worked, and then just sell it and move on when you've
Yeah.
affected so many other people's lives. And it's the same kind of thing.
And
It's
yeah, it's that time it takes then to sort of recover that. Each part, and what a lot of people do. And don't get me wrong, I'm not one for supporting blood sport, and I've been in Africa where I've seen sort of the trophy hunting parties that go out, and it's some, and this is the other thing. So, and we'll get on. We might as well get onto the hunting element now, because I think this is the sort of the place where people sort of tune out from sort of the outdoors lifestyle.
mhm,
Is my belief is, if you're 19 fucking stone and you can hardly fucking move or breathe, then you don't have any right to shoot an animal that could probably outrun you. If you're fit and you're wherewithal, and you can trap an animal and you can set a snare, and you're fit and able bodied, 100% be at it. That in my eyes, that's the thing that people see with trophy hunting, is some fat cat banker American that's coming away for a weekend to shoot a majestic lion or whatever. Completely understand that. And I understand, I do empathize with that sentiment. But then on the other side, that loss of connection with where our actual food comes from, and what we were, which is hunter gatherers. And if you didn't fucking
mhm.
shoot and eat an animal, then you probably died. Um, and people. I hate it. I was saying the other day, actually, I used to love. One of my favorite days of the week when I was younger was to go shopping, supermarket. That was like, awesome. We get to go and get all this new food, and
Yeah,
then I'd get back and stuff my face with whatever it was. Whereas now I absolutely despise it, because I've come more full circle and understood like the connection with food is a lot more important than the actual eating of it. And especially in this country, like you were saying, 50,000 deer, venison is one of the best meats that you can buy in
Mm-hmm.
this country. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
best sort of sources of food and nutrients and lean. It's not tampered with. It's not fucked
Yeah.
about with. It's not injected with fillers, and it's not
Yeah.
sort of kept in a cow shed, this, that, the other. It's pure natural. But then when I say to people, "Oh, venison's amazing," and they kind of get squeamish about it, which is like, well, oh yeah, but it's Bambi. Yeah, but it tastes good and it's really good for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah, I think what I sort of want to explore is why do you think in this sort in America it's sort of the hunting sort of culture is massive, and it might be down to a bit of guns, but why in this country do we get sort of squeamish and so uppity, about fox hunting, about deer hunting, about stalking, and so on and so? Why is that disconnect there?
yeah, 100%. There's a disconnect. We don't know where our food comes from anymore. My freezer, I've got a freezer in the garage there, and that's full. I mean, one of the things you said was, when you buy venison, I am lucky enough not to buy venison. I don't buy venison. I don't buy fish. I fish all summer. I hunt all winter. So think of it this way. And going back to the trophy hunting thing, I'm quite kind of glad you touched on that. You mentioned trophy hunting. So what's a trophy?
Yes.
To me, a trophy is a memory, a photograph,
Yeah.
a set of antlers, something that you found
Yeah, yeah.
on the hill on the way, maybe a bit of heather that you've squashed between, 2 pages of a book or whatever. That's a trophy.
True,
It's
true.
a memory. It's a memory of something that happened. Now, when we manage deer, and I know this is the same in Africa, it's the same in America. It is managing. It's not slaughter.
Mhm.
And
No,
you
there's
mentioned
rules
blood
and
sport.
everything set in place.
So what happens is when you go out to manage deer, for instance, and it's the same with elephants, it's the same with other wildlife. There's usually an expert on the ground that knows that ground, and they know the deer in the populations, they know the herds inside out. Now they will keep a very, very close eye on which animals. Like there are cull animals and there are animals that you actually leave. So they've got good strong DNA. And they'll pass that DNA on through the herd, and then when they get older and they start becoming less strong, and there's every chance that when they're sort of fighting to pass the DNA on in the herd, they'll get injured because they're weaker. Then
Mm.
that is the time that those animals should be removed from the herd. Now that's for the benefit of the herd because it keeps the DNA strong, it keeps the herd strong, and it's a real benefit. So it's a huge management process. Now we're talking about trophy hunting. So if a gamekeeper goes out from an estate, walks up the back of the hill, sees the deer, thinks, yeah, he's that deer, that stag is probably maybe 8 years old now. You can see, there are telltales. You can see he's getting older. His antlers are going back. They're reducing in size. His frame isn't as strong. So it's his time. So we need to take
Yeah.
him while we can, while he's got meat on him and he's not emaciated, because quite often if
Yeah,
deer
yeah.
get too old, they'll starve to death. They won't make it through a winter. So there's still value in meat. There's not as much value in
Yeah.
him where the herd's concerned. So that is chosen then to be taken out of the herd. So what communities do, and rural communities like in Africa, like in Scotland or America, is they will pick an animal that they will then go and stalk and remove from the herd. It's done what it
Yeah.
needs to do. The clever thing is to get more money into that community, which you can think about a long winter in Scotland. There's no tourists. There are very few tourists. There are cafes that close all winter. There are pubs and hotels that close all winter or have one or two guests in. Why not have somebody come in to pay? They want to go and shoot a deer. So they'll
Mhm.
come into the area, they'll book a hotel, they'll eat in the local restaurant, they'll fill up, with fuel at the fuel station or the local garage. They're literally paying the community's wages through very, very lean months, and then they'll go up onto the hill, they'll shoot a deer that needs to be shot, But the difference is
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
paying money to do that, and they're injecting money into the community to do the same job that I could have just done, walked out the house, gone and shot it and come back, and earned absolutely nothing for the community right the way throughout. So that's trophy hunting. But that's what people don't
Yeah, I
see.
get that.
People see somebody stood there. If
Yes.
somebody wants a picture with antlers like this, they can have that picture. That's fine. But there is so much more around it that is much more important
Yeah.
than the trophy.
I think I've always been of the volition of, if you if you kill an animal and you eat it and it gives something other than just the pleasure of killing it, which is sort of
Yeah.
the problem. I don't know, to be fair, because I've never sort of identified with these people that sort of protest against fox hunting or trophy hunting or whatever it is. If there is some benefit that comes from that animal, whether it be um, a skin from that animal for clothing or for warmth or for whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
meat for sustenance, or whether it be, like football, our national game, it was a pig's bladder back in the day. That
Yeah.
it had a use to an extent. If there is that sort of use to it, and this is one of the I've spoke with our mutual friend at FIFA, like quite at length on this when we should have been playing hockey. Um, like my dream is almost like a regenerative existence with the land and with have my pigs and my
Yeah.
sheep and my deer and whatnot. And you know, I've always thought, right, well, if I butcher one deer, one cow, one pig, one lamb per year, that's my family sorted in terms of meat. But then what do I do with the bones? Oh, well, I've got dogs. So dogs
Mm.
can have the bones or you can make bone broth. And what do I do with the skins? Oh, well, you can make rugs and blankets and
Yeah.
shoe linings. And then, well, what do I do with like the eyeballs and this, that, the other? Well, if you grind them up, they make good fertilizer and you can make a bone meal and this, and that sort of use for every single part of an
Hmm.
animal that you cull, that's disappeared completely
Yeah.
from public's knowledge in terms of the fact that people go and buy boxes of bone meal from B&Q.
Yeah.
There's other garden centres and whatnot available, but they'll go and buy a box of bone meal and not understand that that is crushed up bones from an animal or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
sort of disconnect is so detrimental, I think, to us as a society.
It's really frustrating because I spend half my time educating on on why we shoot, and actually we're a very good self-regulating sector, because we are advocating a minimum level of training to be able to shoot deer in Scotland. So at the minute,
Mm,
if you've got a rifle, you can go out and shoot deer. If you've never shot one before, you can just go and do it. So
yeah,
we are working with the Scottish government to try to raise standards. And
yeah,
you know, I myself, if I'm butchering a deer, I'll take every piece of that deer and I'll do something with it. And
yeah,
it's there is a big misunderstanding, really. I mean, there's a campaign last year. There was a paper written about shooting deer and leaving them on the hill just to rot down. And they said that with the microbes that that would come from that, and then with the feeding of the diversionary feeding of the raptors would maybe take the raptors away from other red listed species, perhaps raiding nests or whatever. But if you think about it, you shoot one deer, that is a very microscopic part of the ground that's going to get a very minimal amount of benefit from that deer's carcass. So as a sector, we are saying you don't do that. If you're going to shoot the deer, you're under an obligation to get that deer off the hill and to get that deer into the food chain, so so it is used. Every bit of it is used and it's not wasted. So this is again what people don't see. They're not blood sports. The people who actually do it
no,
are very well trained. Where our ethos is all about non-wastage. Let's get this meat and let's get it into the game dealer so it can go into the food chain. And the thing is, I would much rather be watching it. I mean, I've got a farm up the road that I control the deer on. I know literally every deer on there. the herds, and I
Yeah.
choose which ones to take out at the right time. Um, and I know they're healthy. I've been watching them. They're living an organic life. They're not pumped full of chemicals, like you said. They're not being hung up in
Yeah.
an abattoir, stunned with a stun gun, and then having its
Oh,
throat slit.
yeah.
You know, my deer and the deer I eat, they've lived a free organic life, a very happy organic life, and within a split second they've been shot and they're dead on the ground. They know nothing about it. That's the
Yeah,
meat I
I
eat.
think like you mentioned with the self-regulating as well is the fact that if like, if you fuck up, then the herd dies and you're out of a job.
Well,
And
yeah.
that's the sort of thing is the fact that you know you're managing it to the point where it's like you're not killing too many, so the fact that the herd sort of depletes and dies, and then you're out of a job, and then oh shit, we've all fucked up. You
Mm,
and then if you don't let it happen, then obviously it's a detriment to the herd as well at the same time.
mhm.
So it's like that very fine balancing act that generally we wouldn't need to do that because if we hadn't have meddled in the first place, because there would be predators still in this country, how that would prey on deer. There's very little that would sort of prey on a deer in this game. I mean, you tell me, but I'm sure obviously there used to be wolves. There probably used to be bears at one point. I think the
Yeah,
only predators we've got are the birds and foxes and stoats
yeah.
and stuff. That they're not going to take a deer. Not a
Well,
big one.
a lot of people want lynx reintroduced as well, and we don't have the habitat for lynx.
Mm,
We've deforested, so we don't have enough ground for them, or suitable habitat, should I say? Um, in any case, lynx prey on roe deer, which is one of the smallest native deer in the UK. So what we need to do is concentrate on reducing numbers of the likes of red deer on the hill, which lynx couldn't and wouldn't predate on. So
yeah.
on one hand, you've got sort of green orientated people saying we need links to get deer numbers down. They've no clue. They've no clue. What we need are
No.
red deer numbers reduced. So the two don't marry up. It's just this ideology again.
Yeah.
Um, but
It,
we
it's
we
that
constantly
altruistic stuff, yeah, of like, oh,
we
I'm doing a good thing.
but you don't really understand anything about it. I
Yeah.
can see your intention, but
Yes.
I spend a lot of time in the Scottish Parliament and my colleagues down south as well. In the Senedd and Wales and Westminster and Northern Ireland, and we are trying to get the government to legislate where evidence is concerned rather than public opinion, because this is huge now. There'll be a survey.
Mm.
Chris Packham will do a survey, and because he's got 5 million followers, then you'll get a return of about 250,000 on a survey, most of which come from the central belt in Scotland or London or places where they've never seen a deer, unless it's behind a
Yeah.
fence in a park. So you've got a huge weight behind this one opinion, this skewed opinion, but then you've got our sector with some real evidence that's presented in
Mm.
to counter it. But which one wins? Politics is about public opinion, so
Yeah.
there's only going to be one
And
outcome,
that's the
isn't there?
thing. I've always sort of been I'm not affiliated with one part of the party or the other because like I said, I kind of see the merits on all of them. But the one thing that I do base a lot of my opinion on is the facts, and if somebody says something, and this is probably the cynic or the as I've got older, the growing cynic in me in the terms of the fact that right, I'm going to go and research that, and at the start of that research is I'm going to go and research it and prove them wrong. But
Yeah.
ultimately, what will tend to happen is the fact that right, I understand how they got to that opinion or how they got to that thing, and I still might disagree with them, but I understand it more. I understand
Mm-hmm.
why they say that, and one of the big things for me at the minute. Well, I say at the minute, it's probably been the last 5 years, and I've never quite managed to comprehend it. Renewable energy stuff. That where I live, on every hilltop around here, you can see the windmills.
Yeah.
They're all over, and then we go to the beach, and you see them all down the offshore wind farms, and the public opinion is, "Oh, it's green energy, it's great, it's good for you, it's fantastic, we need more of them." And I've always sort of hated them to be honest. They are kind of, they are a landmark. Oh yeah, we're going up near the windmills or whatever. But I've always like disliked them. One, because they're noisy as fuck when you're up there, when they're on, and two, sort of they're just a bit of a blot on the landscape. So I started doing the delve and the research into it, and now understanding how dangerous they are to the countryside and the environment,
Mm.
and then even more so with the offshore wind farms that are in the sea, how much they're fucking up the marine life. And it comes back to that age old thing of doing something with good intentions, but then fucking dropping a bomb and sort of screwing everything
Yeah,
up. And I've never understood in this country, there's a big focus on wind. I get it, it's kind of windy. There's a big focus on solar, which is sort of almost the universal answer to fossil fuels. But it pisses down in this country 10 months out of 12. Why aren't we using hydro more? Why aren't we
yeah,
focusing on that element, which is the less damaging of all three elements of renewables?
yeah,
And we've got the climate to do it. Um,
yeah.
so it, I kind of understand that it's good intentions, but I think my whole point is the fact that, do you believe that the wrong, or I say the wrong people, that's not right. It's the people that shouldn't be making the decisions are the ones making the decisions based on the fact that they don't have the knowledge to be making them decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, potentially. It depends on who's making the decisions, though. That's the problem. I mean, I'm going
Yeah.
to be probably labelled as a conspiracy theory, conspiracy. I can't think bloody word. Theorist.
Yeah.
But
Well, we all
I'm
are until they're proven right, to be fair.
Well, yeah, I'm not a fan of wind power at all. You know, you're pouring millions of tons of concrete either into the earth or into the sea. You've got these massive turbines that are actually a danger to our wildlife. You know, they're striking eagles and birds of prey left, right, and centre, which never gets spoken about. Oddly enough, you know, that gets
Mm,
brushed under the carpet. And then I don't know what the shelf life is, but you've seen masses and masses, these huge excavated holes with the
the
turbine
blades.
blades buried in
Yeah.
there. And what the hell? It's just, for me, there is a better way. I think hydro would be much better. I think you're right as well. You know, it pisses down here more often than not. Um, so you've got to wonder why with the likes of wind power is being preferred. Now, who's making that decision?
Mm,
Because I'm more and more thinking our politicians aren't in charge. You know, our
yeah.
politicians don't make decisions, and somebody is making an awful lot of money or an awful lot of power somewhere for having turbines, whether they're corporations, whether they're other governments. I don't have the answer, but I certainly don't think
No.
wind power is the answer. But they seem to be shoving it down our throats, left, right, and centre.
Along with everything else that they tend to sort of shove down our throats and make some money from.
Mm.
So the thing from sort of hunting and outdoorsman and sort of that adventure lifestyle, you can get into sort of the sea element now. The picture that you sent over for your episode art was fucking awesome. So such a cool picture. I did not expect that, and it was difficult to sort of edit and get onto the art, but it looks so cool. So
Just remind me which one was that, because I think I had a few that I was going to
it
send
was
to you.
it was the one where you sat on your spear gun
Oh
underneath the
yeah,
ocean, like looking up. It's a really good picture. Everybody will see it anyway. But I must admit, you know, I didn't. I wouldn't have thought in and around, where I live, Lancashire. Closest beach is sort of Blackpool, St Anne's, Fleetwood Way, where it, other than the odd sort of bit of samphire and whatnot, it's pretty barren, pretty dead. It doesn't seem much to be going on. It's like that underwater sort of desert element. I wouldn't have thought that sort of spearfishing and stuff like that would be sort of a big thing, or a done thing in this country. Even, you know, that's sort of a Caribbean-esque sort of thing in my world. You know, how I suppose what, yeah, and harks back. How do you get into this sort of from your background and understand? How do you? I can understand. I can get the logical sort of pathway from outdoorsman and, you know, getting into, but, you know, that's the same as me. I wasn't ever sort of told not to, but getting out and getting into the wilderness and learning bits and bobs and watching Ray Mears and Ed Stafford and Bear Grylls and all that. Get it? Where does the ocean element come from? Because that is a surreal. I can't see the pathway.
I'm a water baby. I was brought up in the southwest of Scotland in a village that nobody would have heard of. Basically, if you get to the top of the M6, turn left and keep driving. When you get wet, that's where my village is.
Beyond Dumfries, beyond Galloway.
Oh yeah, like the far reaches, right? You know, get to the Rins, turn left down the peninsula towards the Mull of Galloway, and you know you'll find me down there. So, very much a water baby. I've grown up in the fishing community and the farming community. My family ran 3 fishing boats. We used to take divers out. When I was 13, I used to take divers out to local wrecks, and you know, and run one of our small boats and take fishermen out and I've been on the sea. It's hilarious actually. I've got such a love for the sea. We had we had a 6-foot rowing boat that because my bedroom, I lifted my head off my pillow and I could see my boat in front of the, you know, on the beach in front of the house.
Oh wow!
And we had a 6-foot rowing boat, and whenever there's a basking shark in the bay, you know, we used to get the rowing boat out, and it would be 5 times the length of the boat, but we'd be, you know, going up touching the basking shark, and I was just, how old would I have been? Maybe 14. I was probably about a mile and a half to 2 miles out rowing into the Irish Sea, just with a fishing rod. And you heard this rumble in the distance, and it's like, "Whoa," and you're looking around and you think, well, that's a big boat coming from somewhere. So then this big, massive gin palace that probably, you know, wouldn't look out of place in Monaco turned up, and these Irish guys that were pissed out their face, you know, and when they came up alongside me, it literally, like, it blocked out the sun, it went dark, you know, and
Wow!
you're gonna have to excuse the accent now. He's like, "Hey, sure, are you okay down there?" And I'm like, "I'm fine, yeah, thanks." And he's like, "Do you want to fucking tow into the land?" And I'm like, "No, it's just taking me about 2.5 hours to row out here. You know, I'm going to my fishing spot." And he's like, "Oh, cool." He said, "Right, which way's Port Patrick?" And I'm like, "It's like you've probably got about 200 grand's worth of navigation equipment on that boat, but you're literally asking a 14-year-old boy in a rowing boat 2 miles out to sea which way Port Patrick is." I said, "Mate, it's about 9 miles that
I
way. Just
love
keep
it.
going, you'll see it." But yeah, it's spearfishing. I mean, we didn't have a lot of money when we were young, so I had a broomstick. I had a hook off a big shark hook off one of our fishing boats, straightened out, lashed to a broomstick, and I used to snorkel with the cheapest of masks and spear flatfish in the bay at the front of the house.
Wow!
So it was very, very basic, but you know, that's how I grew up. So I've got a, you know, picture
So do you?
of me with a flatfish this big when I was about probably 7 or
Oh
8.
wow! Do you think that
So
come? So do you think that sort of um, foray or the path into, you know, hunting, outdoorsman, and adventure, that comes from, in your sense, maybe necessity, in terms of, like you said, you didn't have much money and it was like you hunted to eat and you hunted to get, you know, fish for supper and fish for dinner or whatever it may be. Do you think that's
a,
where it
a,
comes
a,
from to an extent?
A little bit, a little bit, yeah. I mean, we just lived out off tin food, and you know, the cheapest stuff
Yeah.
that my old dear could get, you know, is what we ate. You know, usually the labelless tins in the supermarket on the reduced shelf or something like that. You know, you never knew what you were getting.
No, what was
But
it? What it
no,
used, no frill, no frills. That's what it used to be, wasn't it? No
no
frills.
fills, yeah, and a box of broken biscuits as well. You know, it's like you always got them cheaper.
Yeah,
But
I remember
I
them.
think I think it was more a case of the lifestyle because I was a young kid in this village, and there were probably maybe one or two other kids in the village, at the time, and that's just what he did. There was nothing else to do because we're miles away from anywhere.
Mm,
So if around there, if you don't fish, you farm, and that's it.
yeah.
Um, so fishing was a natural recreation for me, and I got good at it. Actually, I've just had an article published in Sea Angler magazine, it's a massive
Oh
thing for me
wow,
because I've read that magazine for the best part of 35 years. When I was a kid, I remember playing hooky from school and sitting on my dad's fishing boat. And I got caught actually one day. Sat there with the Sea Angler, reading when I should have been in school, and just to think, that 30, 35 years later, I've got an article in there myself is a big thing
that's
for me.
awesome.
But yeah,
Well,
but
it's a big. I
it
think that
was
would be a big thing for everybody.
it was a way of life for me. It's just how I grew
Yeah.
up. And I used to sell. We used to come back in off the boat and sell mackerel to the holiday makers that were staying in local caravan sites and things like that. So no, it was a proper way to grow up.
Yeah, and I think that's you know, I kind of take a little bit of solace in with the recent emergence of like forest schools as well. In that sense, is like
Mm,
sort of bringing that nature element into this the you know. I completely understand the people that may be living in the city or have high powered jobs or they're busy all the time, and we all know how much work from 9 to 5 Monday to Friday takes out of parents, like you mentioned right at the beginning, or maybe been off camera. You never the tiredness never really leaves you from the moment that they're born. Is the fact that you start walking like a zombie. One of my friends actually, he's I'll give him a shout out, Louis. He owns Red Rose Exterior Cleaning. He's one of the sponsors of the pod, and he's recently just had a baby, and we went training on Wednesday night, and he mentioned mentioned that he's all right, he's not tired yet, and I was like, it'll come,
yeah,
just you wait,
just wait.
and then you'll be tired forever, then, and
Yeah.
you sort of just get used to it. Um, but I think understanding that parents are like that and your secondary caregiver, which is always or always been your teachers. That's your primary is your parents. Secondary is grandparents, teachers, coaches, whatever it may be. The fact that if any kid goes to a forest school, gets that opportunity to figure out whether they like the outdoors, whether they want to go in
Yeah.
that direction, is awesome. I think that's the problem for me. And my daughter goes to an amazing school, and I know a lot of the teachers personally. Um, they do a lot of activities. They're not necessarily classed as a forest school, but they do a lot of activities to get kids out,
Mm,
because she's very much like me in terms of the fact that academia, she's very, very naturally clever. I coasted through school to the point where it was just like, you know, I endured it,
mm.
knowing very well that my expertise are in um, things that aren't measured in tests and exams. My
Yeah.
expertise are in sort of, I like I said, um, this venture in terms of podcast. I love having these conversations, and I love speaking to people like yourself that's lived a completely different life to what I have, but yet somehow sort of not envious, but it's an admiration. It's an admiration of what you do, and um the fact that you get free venison pisses me off slightly,
Oh,
a little bit.
it's a different way of life. It's a
Yeah,
completely different way of life. I'm envious over people who have stayed in one place, built up a family network, built up a friend network. Their teacher is now teaching their little ones, and yeah, I'm envious of that. This is my 40th house. I've
right.
lived all around the UK. I've never put roots down. I don't have, I've got
Mm.
very good friends, but they're very spread out. So it's it's not a case
Like
of
the
being envious. It's
littlest
just
hobo.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. It's not a case of being envious. It's just a different life, isn't it? So you always
Yeah,
look.
and it's so good to sort of, that's the way that you learn, and it's the way that you understand. And I think if, like harking back to the politicians, if the politicians actually came, who make these decisions, actually came out and learnt, and actually came out and understood X, Y, and
Mm,
Z, then the world would be a better place.
yeah.
Um, and that yeah, it counts for a lot in my opinion. That sort of inquisitive nature, wanting to learn a little bit more about it. So obviously you go. That's how you grew up. That's how sort of the outdoors has always been part of your life. How do you go from that to policing?
I used to watch The Bill an awful lot.
Oh, do, 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 do,
Yeah,
do.
honestly, Bob Cryer and Reg were my heroes. But no, it's um, yeah. I always had this inkling, this hankering of wanting to be in the police. And I mean, none of my family were. I don't know actually where it came from. To me, it was just exciting, and I've always had this.
Hmm.
I know it sounds cliche, but I've always had this want or need to either help people on in life or fix things for people, and just be
Hmm.
useful and help those who perhaps can't necessarily help themselves to a degree. So I
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
get joy from that. Same with hunting now. I'll take people out to shoot the first deer and teach them how, and I get more joy from watching them harvest the first carcass and butcher it than I do doing it myself. And I just thought,
Yeah.
if I can help people, if I can stop somebody's house from being burgled, or catch somebody who has burgled a house or stolen a car, and make that person's life better, then I get to do that. Plus, it's really, really exciting as well. Um, so my
Yeah.
mind was set on police from a very young age. I nearly, I nearly sort of a carrot got dangled with Royal Marines and mixed gas diver at one point, and at one point I got offered a place as a mixed gas diver in the Marines and the police at the same time, and I thought, do you know what? They're both awesome, but I went down the police route. Um,
So
but
what's a mixed? Did you say mixed gas diver? What's that?
Yeah, so basically, it's a commercial diver in the Navy that would stay down at depths that you normally, wouldn't recreationally dive to. And then when you
Or is
when you
it
do
like
that,
them ones with the big
yeah,
helmet
it can
things?
be.
Is that what they
Yeah,
would have been? Yeah.
yeah. So they'll stay in the water for a long time. They'll probably go deeper than recreational divers, which means you've got to breathe sort of different mixes of gases rather than just normal cylinders on your back. And but
Got you.
it was the kind of danger element attracted me to that. But I thought, well, I've got the offer of something I wanted to do for as long as I can remember, so I'm going to go with police.
Right. Cool. And I'm presuming, like, not to sort of um, put shade on the police because we'll come back to that. But in terms of that mixed gas, that is that the one where they have to come up into the decompression chambers and so on and so forth for a time because they've spent so long at depth.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, I mean, I'm by no means an expert on
No.
commercial diving. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it is. If you're going down to any particular depth, you're going to have to stop at certain intervals, depending on the depth and the time down there, and sort of make sure you don't have anything in your bloodstream that you don't want in there expanding when you're coming up, because that's what it'll do. It'll
Yeah. Well,
cause you problems.
I
So.
watched that. I watched that. What did I watch? So one of my favorite it's like a docu film of Alex Honnold, the climber, like the
El
free
El
solo.
El
It's
Cap.
just
Yeah,
that I can watch that and still know what's going to happen and know that he does it and know that
yeah,
obviously nothing goes wrong. And every single time I am gripped to every time it
yeah,
comes up in my like social media feed every now and again, and every single
yeah,
time I'm just like hooked because it's an amazing
yeah,
achievement. And then I got turned on to this free diving one. I
yeah.
can't remember what it's called. Let me try and I need to give it a shout out.
Yeah, I
Right,
mean,
where?
Alex Honnold is just ridiculous. I mean, I'm a rock climber as well, and I've soloed some routes, but the routes that I've done, he'd do probably without any hands. Genuinely,
Yeah, I
he's
mean,
just
it, I do. I do my fair share. Or I have done my fair share of climbing, but I've never sort of done outdoors. It's always been climbing walls for me and whatnot. And I've always enjoyed it. It's always been like a really. And then I got to the point where it was a bit too heavy. I put on a bit of weight, and it became a little bit more difficult on the wrists and the hands. And then I'm probably back at the weight that I should be now. So, but then
yeah.
hockey took over. So unfortunately, in fact, you know what I did the other week? I took out my chalk bag and my belay, and I took out my climbing shoes, and I put them next to the TV in the living room, just to remind me, like, it's always there if I want to go.
Yeah,
Um,
inspiration.
but he is like that sort of. I challenge anybody to sort of watch that docufilm and not be absolutely glued to the screen, and that
Yeah.
sort of. And I think that's what the attraction. Just discovering it now. The attraction of nature is the pure humility it demands from us as humans. Is the fact that you can make every plan, you could have every piece of equipment under the sun, but Mother Nature could still fuck you up
Yeah.
and could
Yeah.
still ruin you. And
Yeah.
watching him climb the way he does, and then constantly having to remind yourself as the viewer, he doesn't have a rope. If he makes a mistake here, or if the face of the wall that he's climbing crumbles, or whatever it may be, he
Mm.
dies. It's not like
Yeah.
and it's almost all the chips in. um and I don't, obviously, for those that have not seen it, tough shit. It's been out for a long time. You should have seen it. But at the
Mm.
top, when he completed this thing that nobody's ever completed before in his life, and the phone call between him and his missus, which is just like, oh yeah, I did it. Yeah, yeah. All right, yeah, I'll see you back at home. And it's just
Yeah.
like there's no
Yeah.
celebration. There's no sort of look how amazing I am. It's just, yeah, I set
Yeah.
out to do it and I did it, bro.
I find with people who are good at extreme sports, don't really get excited about stuff. And I
No,
think that's it's a concentration thing. If you get excited, you're not concentrating. You're not really focusing.
true.
You look at Formula One drivers. Show me an interesting Formula One driver to interview. It's it's
Yeah,
it's
I
like
agree.
they're all dull as dishwater, but I think you need that because you need to process so much information so quickly. You can't, if you're
Mm,
excited and that's the way your mind works, then it's taken away from focus. And it's the same with Alex Honnold. It's the same with anybody that's any good at extreme sports. You'll find that they don't really get excited. They look forward to stuff, but they don't get excited. But with
yeah,
the
yeah.
big trip coming up. And I think it's a very specific mindset, to be very good at
Well,
something extreme.
yeah, that
Uh,
documentary, by the way, is The Deepest Breath on the Deep Sea
yeah.
dive, and watching that and understanding sort of, I think there was there's been a few that I've watched. The extreme sports, like you mentioned, there was a little docufilm on three wingsuit, um, like what they call base jumping, yeah,
Base jumpers,
base
yeah.
jumpers, and yeah, they went all over the world, and the cat. I think one of halfway through the docu film or the documentary series, the cameraman died doing one of the runs. Like they kind of all separated a bit and came back, and this, that, the other, and it's almost like but it doesn't stop the other two from carrying on
No,
doing it, which
no.
is like it's such a good sort of advert for what nature and what adventure and what extreme sports does for people in terms of that mental resilience. Is
Mm.
you know I've got a gentleman called Seb Smart coming on, friend of mine. He's a pro surfer based in Sennan in Cornwall. He was the person that gave me my first ever surfing lesson, and um, watching him do what he does, and he's in the barrels, and some of the waves he sort of surfs is and I just think like it's scared. Not only are the waves crazy, but at the same time he's surfing in seas where there's fucking sharks and whatnot. And
Yeah.
I remember watching the World Surfing Championships where who was it who got attacked by a fucking shark? Honestly, there's so much that goes on in this grey matter.
Mm.
That sometimes I
Well,
forget.
one of the reasons I
Get
started
names and get
skydiving,
dates.
yeah, well, that's age, isn't it? One of the reasons why I started skydiving was to base jump. That was my sole purpose.
Wow.
And I haven't got there yet. So
No.
I think I might have to start again. But I've had a couple of very, very hairy close shaves with skydiving anyway, and I'm pretty experienced at it, pretty inexperienced at it as well. So
Yeah. Well, the one that I was talking about is Mick Fanning, and it was the World
mm,
Surfing Championships. I'll show you actually. And uh, if I'm right, I think it was like sort of the final in the World Surfing Championships, and that's the sort of still
unreal. That's a picture.
now. Now that happened live on Eurosport, and I remember
Oh,
watch. And then what happened after that? So after that image, what happened is the wave came up, and he disappeared from the view of the cameras. And obviously, you had the jet skis go out like
yeah.
they do, but for about it felt like forever. He disappeared from view, and you didn't. And obviously, that was the last image that you kind of saw. And
Yeah. Game
and
over.
it's I mean, you see there, like he actually he didn't sort of get him, but it came from behind him, and honestly, like, and then to get back in the water after that
Yeah.
has happened
Yeah.
is just it's crazy to start with because it's hard for any normal person to comprehend, but
Yeah.
it extreme sports, and whether that be deep sea diving, and doing it for a purpose in terms of spearfishing, whether it be surfing, skydiving, rock climbing, even motocross and stuff like that. There's something to be said for the mentality that it sort of breeds and creates.
Yeah.
And I think it does make you a better all round person.
It's an
But
accepted
yeah,
risk completely. I mean,
yeah.
you look at we were spearfishing, free diving the north of Scotland 2 weeks ago, and we pulled our good friend out of the water. He was he was a goner. And if we hadn't
Wow.
got to him in time, he'd have been out and never found, quite honestly.
Oh
But it's
wow.
an accepted risk. I spoke to him yesterday, and he said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I'm fine. I'll get back in the water. That's no bother." He said, "Just do things slightly differently." I've got
Yeah, I suppose that's how you learn.
my uncle won the TT in the sidecars a number of times. He died. I've got two cousins that have died bike racing. My whole family ride bikes. I ride bikes, and somebody said, "Oh, are you gonna sort of give that up now?" I'm like, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No.
You know, the skydiving as well. The last jump I did, it was a little while ago now. I've kind of come away from it. I had one hell of a jump. And I sat on the ground afterwards. Spoiler alert, I made it down and I didn't die. Um, I sat on the ground just absolutely chuckling to myself because of I can go through it if you want.
Yeah,
If
do
you,
it. Go for it. Go for it. Tell me.
so I was a student jumper, and the students tend to get bigger canopies than the expert and experienced jumpers, purely because they're easier to control and they're a bit more forgiving. So I jumped out in a pretty stiff wind. It was borderline whether the student jumpers were able to go out, but they let me, and I steered the canopy in, landed right on the cross in the middle of the airfield, and I had really experienced guys coming over saying, "Was that you? Landing that big canopy right on that cross?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." Feeling all smug going into the hangar. Um, So anyway, we were waiting around for a second jump, and the wind had got up a little bit, but I could hear the conversation. He's like, "Well, look, he handled it really well then. It's not much stronger, the wind. We'll just let him go up on this next one." They shouldn't have. So
Famous last words.
they shouldn't have. This is over Newcastle, by the way. So we went up, jumped out, going through the whole routine, pull the canopy, instructors flared away, I pull the canopy, and I'm just enjoying the ride and looking around, spotting the airfield, that's fine. So the next thing, um, I'm I'm trying to drive into the wind just to try and get over where I need to land and working out my landing pattern, and I'm going backwards, and I'm getting further and
Oh,
further away
nice.
from the X, the cross on the ground. So I'm pulling down on the front risers, to try and get drive into wind a bit better. But because my canopy is much bigger than the instructors, I'm going backwards and they're not. So I'm thinking, oh shit, right, okay. So at some point, you've got to make the decision to run downwind because the fence for the airfield was coming up. It was quite clear I wasn't going to make the landing site or the airfield for that matter. So in the end, I was 300 feet over the motorway that goes around Newcastle, with my
Oh,
legs
no.
dangling, my legs dangling above the trucks going past. Um, so I look behind me, and downwind, there's a little field with two horses in, and I think, right, fine, that's good. Um, so
That'll do.
I, I that'll do. So I pull on one handle, swing round. I'm driving downwind. I think, well, the horses should scatter, hopefully. So the next thing I see, power lines going across this little field that I'd planned to land in. Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
Whoops.
So I'm thinking, right. So by this point, I'm over an industrial unit, and I'm really not very high up at all. An industrial estate. So I'm looking around, and there's a little triangle of grass that I can see, and I'm thinking, well, that's just going to have to be it. It's down behind a warehouse. So as I got closer to it, it was a little triangle of grass that was beside a power substation with the big spiky fencing all around it as well. And by this point, I am shit out of options. So I thought, there was a lorry loading bay that's literally the only thing I could get to because I'm probably 100 feet off 80 feet off the floor at this point. So I aimed for this lorry loading bay, but because of the building that I went down behind was quite tall, it took the wind out of my parachute. I dropped like a stone onto concrete in the lorry loading bay. Both ankles went
Oh,
over at the
nice.
same time. um, so I sat there straightening my ankles up, wondering whether they'd been smashed to bits. And I got to my feet. I could put weight on them. So I was literally in a car park outside of this industrial unit. So I gathered my parachute up under my arm, walked into reception, and I said to the lady, I couldn't just borrow your phone, could I?
Can you tell me where I am, please?
I just stood there with the bloody parachute
Oh,
under my arm. So I was,
oh.
that was,
So what?
that was actually,
Like,
sorry, go on.
are you gonna? Have you jumped since then?
I haven't jumped since then, but it wasn't to do with that. I sat on the ground actually chuckling to myself for a little while, and it's a good pub story as well. No, sadly, my mum
Yeah.
died soon after that, and
Oh.
I don't know. It was just I came away from it. There was a lot to deal with where my old ear was concerned, and it's just something I never went back to. But I kind of wish I had, and I've
Yeah.
still got one eye on base jumping as an end goal.
I'm
So
sorry to.
that is.
Sorry to hear about your mother. Like, obviously, that's one of those that I think could derail most people or most
Mm,
men as well. Um, we are, I think, minus the odd exception, we're all mother's boys at heart. And I think it's always a difficult sort of thing to sort of comprehend. And me, you know, my mum's still alive, but it was my nana. My nana, when she passed, that sort of derailed me, and I kind of stopped doing certain things that I loved. Not yeah, like you said, not because it was sort of a conscious choice. It was just
mm,
the fact that I kind of stopped at the time because of obviously
Yeah.
everything that needed to, and never kind of really got back into it or picked it back up.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a big change. I've got a pal that's going through a divorce at the minute, and he's sort of lost the
mhm.
love for the things he likes doing. And I think it's just a big change in life can do that to you, and um, it's just something I've never gone back to. And I really should at some point.
Yeah, but it's so important as well. Like you said, when people are going through them bad times, whether it be divorce or grief, or even something as innocuous as losing your job or something along those lines. These, whether it be sports, hobbies, lifestyle, whatever sort of blanket you want to put it under, they are so important because they are almost at the core of who you are as a person. So,
Yeah.
for instance, sport has always been my big thing, from and sport in literally sport in general. So I've done everything from skiing in the French and Italian Alps to get sea kayaking, river kayaking, football, now hockey. Never played rugby because I hate the game. I don't, and you know what? I don't like watching it, and I don't like playing it. So it's kind of one of those. But and then surfing and anything, rock climbing is another one. Them sorts of sports always been my sort of temple. It's always been like for instance, this last week, I've recorded a hell of a lot of hours of podcasts within talk having conversations with people from different walks of life, completely different sort of rapport and cadence and the way we need to sort of communicate, and every single one of them has been awesome. But I underestimated how fucking tired it would make me, and it
Yeah.
made me so tired. But then going hockey training on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, for that hour and a half, I'm thinking about nothing other
Mm.
than where's the ball? How's my stick? Am I running? Am I in the right position? And everything
Yeah.
to do with hockey, life just fades away and sort of dissolves
Yeah.
into the distance for that 1.5 hours. And I think anybody that's going through that difficult um, part of their life, if they clung on to that hobby, it could be something like knit. I think that's knitting.
Yeah.
You're thinking about just that one thing,
Yeah.
and it kind of takes you out of your own head for a bit.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
attracted to someone with a passion, and whether it's
mm,
sport or whether it's anything, it could be it could be crochet, it could be anything. As long as somebody has a passion, that just awakens something in me and makes me want to know about them, and I'm actually attracted to that person because they're passionate about something. For me, there's nothing as unattractive as somebody who doesn't have anything to do or is just happy with a 9 to 5
I think,
grind and then going watching Corrie in the evening.
yeah, and the right, at the risk of sounding sort of magnetic, they're boring as fuck as well. Like if you've got nothing going on, there's no
Yeah.
substance there, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like I don't drink anymore, but I've been in the pub where conversation turns stale. Everybody's been involved in that sort of conversation where it turns stale, and you go, right, yeah, well, yeah, see you in a bit then, and it's like that
Yeah.
awkward sort of moment of you want to say you boring bastard, but in
Yeah.
fact you don't. You just go, all
I
right, see you later, bye.
as far as I'm concerned, you've got to surround yourself with people where if you're in that situation in the pub, the hours fly by because you can tell
Yeah,
stories and everyone around you can tell stories, and it's always the best night ever. I mean, I was a gamekeeper in Sweden for a little while, and I had some experience out there with wild boar and being literally being charged at by a wild boar or
wow,
it's just it's like canoeing from Sweden to Norway over 10 days through river systems, 100 kilometers and things like that. I genuinely, and I know this is going to sound awful, I can't surround myself with people who haven't experienced things in life, and it doesn't have to be as extreme as that. It's just something.
no,
If somebody's got a passion about bicycles or woodwork or something like that, they're interesting instantly.
yeah,
If
of
somebody's got a
course they
passion
are.
about Emmerdale and Coronation Street, then
I think to be fair, my missus does watch the Emmerdale, but she used to do Coronation Street and Emmerdale, and slowly weaned herself off Coronation Street. So there's only one left to get rid of.
My point is, if that's all in your life, because I've got an ex
No,
who is
yeah, yeah,
literally, she went to work, she came home, the soaps got watched, and then she was catching flies in the chair by 8:30, and it's like, I'm out.
yeah,
I'm
yeah. No,
out.
it's one of those. You've got to have a little bit of substance, and I think that thing is it comes back to that deep-seated sort of question. I think all of us need to sort of maybe aspire to is the fact that what is the purpose and point of life, and what is the purpose and point of being on this planet. And for me, and I'm not by any stretch saying that I've got it all sort of sussed and stretched out, because up until probably 2 months ago I was in complete and utter limbo still. And I think what I've sort of figured, I want to experience as much as I could possibly experience. I want
Yeah.
to go and visit and touch and smell and feel as much as many places as I can.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know what, I think one of the biggest influences for me was growing up was watching nature programs and outdoors programs. And I remember, David Attenborough was the person that I would listen to constantly. I still remember I used to watch it on repeat when the um the gnu, which is the African wildebeest,
Hmm.
crossing the rivers with the crocodiles waiting. That, everybody's seen that at some point. And I
Yeah.
used to have hours and hours of sort of them sorts of wildlife programs that
Yeah.
used to just enthrall me to the point where it was like this actually happens. This is real
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And now I'm lucky enough to have actually seen that in real life. Um,
Superb.
it's then on to the next thing. Yeah, in fact, I'll tell a story. So there's a guy called, when I lived over in Botswana, there was a guy called Tendai, and Tendai was a tennis coach at one of the local schools. And we decided, one day, or he decided, I didn't decide. I wanted to go and do something for the day. He decided that we'd go and visit one of the local crocodile farms. Now, obviously, this isn't crocodile in the wild sense of the word, and it must be strange from outside looking in that this is, oh, it was for me, that this is sort of just a natural thing. So, like, we farm chickens in this country, and if
Hmm.
anybody listening has sort of seen one of the battery farms, it's crazy. Like, it stinks to high heaven. The sound is completely deafening. Um, and this is not on that scale, but obviously, coming from chickens to crocodiles is a bit of a different sort of kettle of
Hmm.
fish. Um, and we were walking down this track, and they do tours for people that wanted to go and see. And we're walking down this track to get to this farm, and it was just sort of like 4 or 5 big pits, um, concrete pits in the middle of nowhere, as well as a big sort of open enclosure with a pond in. This episode is sponsored by the Pendle Mushroom Company, pioneers in the world of functional fungi. They grow, harvest, and dual extract every mushroom right here in the UK, from lion's mane to cordyceps, for maximum purity, potency, and sustainability. Whether you're looking to boost focus, energy, or overall well-being, their tinctures are the real deal. No imported powders, no fillers, just science-backed mushrooms done right. And because you're part of the Cut The Sht community, you can get 10% off all tinctures with the code CTS10 at pendlemushroomco.com. That's CTS10 for 10% off. Unlock the power of nature with the Pendle Mushroom Company. And we were walking down for about 5 minutes, and the lady that was the sort of tour guide was explaining that they have 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and 7-year-old crocodiles, and the 7-year-olds are used for skins and meat. The 5-year-olds are used for skins and meat, and the 3-year-olds are purely used for meat. And they kind of cull half off and then move half up to get older, and so on and so forth. It was like quite interesting. Interesting story. And then it got to the point where she was going on that long, and I kind of interrupted and said, where do you get these little crocodiles? Where do you keep the big crocodiles? And she pointed past me, and literally between me and it was just a chain link fence, like one that you see in a school playground, was this crocodile that must have been about 15 foot long, just sat there basking with its mouth open. And I didn't have a clue. I didn't see it. I walked right past it, didn't see it, didn't clock it, didn't look. And I always thought, like when people think that they're logs in rivers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think, well, of course you could fucking tell it's a crocodile. It's a fucking massive reptile
Yeah.
dinosaur thing.
But then you
Now
just
I
walk straight
know
past
they
one.
are. Yeah, they're that still and calm and stationary. You just
Yeah.
don't even notice them. They don't come into your
Yeah.
periphery or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I ended up picking one up there to to carry on the story. Tendai was from Zimbabwe, and we're looking at the pits where there must have been 30 to 50 crocodiles in each pit, all the young ones, and they had water at one end and just land at the other. And Tendai said, "Can we hold one?" And the lady who was the tour guide said, "Yeah, the gates round the back." And I thought she was being British. I thought she was being sarcastic. Yeah, of course it is. The gates round the back going, edge. Tendai being from Zimbabwe, walked around the back, opened the gate, jumped down into the pit, and all the crocodiles like sort of scattered. He was like, "Lewis, come on!" And I was like, what was I? I was like 21 at the time. I was like, "Oh, okay," jumped in. And I'd seen it, I watched growing up with like Steve Irwin on my screen, left, right, and center. I understood. You grab a crocodile behind the head and at the base of the
Yeah.
tail, and they weren't massive. You're talking probably the size of a cocker spaniel. So they
Yeah.
weren't huge.
Yeah.
They were handable. And the only thing that the woman said was, when you grab it, like presuming that I'm going to grab it already, but she said, when you grab it, turn it on its back, because it kind of sends them into some sort of trance or calms them down or whatever. So Tendai would say, go on. I think I didn't want to be here. You caused this. You grab it. So ultimately, I ended up grabbing this crocodile, this 5-year-old crocodile, one behind the head, one at the base of the tail, and automatically turned it on its back. What she failed to tell me is, when you turn it on its back and it goes into this trance, it loses control of its bowels and pisses all over you. So for the rest of the day, I walked around smelling like stale
Hot piss.
crocodile piss. Yeah. But one of the best experiences I've had in my life.
I wonder how
But
many
yeah,
people she's done
like
that to.
countless. There'll be somebody now walking around that crocodile farm smelling a crocodile piss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, but
Yeah.
but like experiences like that, like you said, in terms of the Sea Anglers magazine, you were reading that when you were 5-6 year old, and now you've just had an article published in it. And then me watching sort of the crocodiles when I was 5-6 years, it must
Yeah.
at some point put that almost plant that seed. And we all are well aware of that self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
in a negative sense. At school, and anybody that's done sociology and stuff understands that if a kid gets told it's bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, the likelihood of that kid becoming bad is increased somewhat.
Yeah.
Now, there must be something at that age, if you're exposed to nature and you're exposed to wildlife and this, that, the other, it runs true all the way through your adult life,
Yeah.
up until the point where you may or may not, but it must increase your chances
Yeah.
of
Oh, 100%.
experiencing it.
100%. I mean, exposure in your formative years is massive, and that's something I try to do with my little one as well. I wanted to experience as much as she can now, so then she has the choice to do what, she can look back like I did. Because I mean, I hung around with one of my pals in school. His dad was a gamekeeper, and he's the real reason why I work in this sector now. I used to
Mm.
leave school on a Friday, go to his house for the weekend, help him feed pheasants, shoot rabbits.
I've
Even
got a
going out
bone to
and
pick with
watching some.
pheasants. I've got a bone to pick with pheasants. One of them motherfuckers have nearly killed me on the M6. It
Hey, they
came
can be
through my
vicious.
windscreen. Oh, honestly, well,
Unreal.
I was in the outside lane, obviously going the speed, obviously going the speed limit. I wasn't going much over,
Of course,
um, and it must have flown from the central reservation, and it came through my windscreen right in front of the steering wheel, just before Lancaster it was. So yeah, I've got a bone to pick with them feathery fuckers. It nearly killed me.
well, I hope you put it in the boot and ate it that night anyway.
No, honestly, it was like it was shredded to bits because it actually came through.
Mm.
It was disgusting. Look, you know what? I wasn't covered in blood. The windscreen was, but I wasn't
Yeah,
covered in blood. But my
yeah.
God, yeah,
It's
yeah. If
well, I mean,
anybody's had that,
yeah, well, I've had a lot to do with pheasants over the years, but thankfully never that. But it's having experiences when you're younger like that. Like I say, I left school on the Friday. Usually went to my pal's house. It was my first real experience of rifles and shotguns and things like that. I've had air guns in the past when I was a kid. But then you know, I went away, pretty serious career in the police, and then when I left the police, I thought, well, what am I going to do? I'm not just going to leave to do nothing. So I thought, well, what did I enjoy when I was young? What do I enjoy in life? And I came back to wildlife. I came back to being in the outdoors, hunting, shooting, fishing, bushcraft, survival, things like that. All the things I used to do as a kid. So I've now managed to make that into a career, really, which is,
so
I,
when did that sort of reevaluation? Like, obviously, you left the police, and I want to come back to that, but I've relatively recently, over the past 2-3 years, gone through that almost. It's what I would deem as maybe a midlife crisis. Like I remember watching my dad go through it a bit later on in life than what I have. And I think I've probably got away lucky and gone through it early. But that almost reevaluation, I spent 17 years in the same industry. And then it was almost like that. This doesn't, I've spent 17 years almost trying to make a square peg fit in a round hole.
yeah,
And then that reevaluation takes place of what lights my fire, what's my passion, what do I enjoy, and the question that I kept on asking myself, and I keep telling myself the answer is the fact that, would I do this for free?
mm,
Would I do it if I didn't get paid for it and I didn't get any money, or there wasn't a boss, or there wasn't like some sort of structure in place, would I still do this? Would I do it for free? And with this podcast and with this venture, 100%. I love
mm,
speaking to people. This is, my missus will tell you, she gets the eye roll comes out whenever we go out and I start, because she's like, oh fucking here we go again. But it's like having that conversation and meeting people from different walks of life and getting their perspective and understanding, that's what really lights me up.
yeah.
So is that a similar thing to what you went through? It's almost that full life reevaluation almost at that point?
It was utterly a life reevaluation. As far as I was concerned, I was in a career for the next 30 years. But things changed. I
Mm-hmm.
got a back injury. I was being towed behind a jet boat and my front ski dug in and I couldn't feel my legs. I was floating in the water. Um, and I had a lot of problems after that. And I can't say the police were the most understanding about it either. They were, as far as they were concerned, you were either fit to work or you weren't, and there was no middle ground.
Right.
Some days, I'd, my back would be great, and then, a couple of weeks later, it wouldn't be so great. And wearing, heavy body armor and having your position changed when you sat in the car because you've got the body armor and all your kit on, it puts stress on your back. And there was absolutely no empathy whatsoever from the police, so it was very black and white with them. So on the times when I'd struggle, it would certainly sort of tip over into work life as well. And as well, I was outside of a drug factory that we'd done a raid on, and I was stood on these pallets at the side of this industrial unit, and the pallets collapsed. I fell off, and I seriously damaged my back again, and that was on duty. They weren't interested. They couldn't have give a
No.
shit. As far as they were concerned, you were just unfit for duty, and you were kind of cast aside until you were fit again. So I got fed up of that mentality, the lack of support from them. And actually, they stopped me because I had a little sort of taster with firearms. I helped the dog section out quite a lot. I helped them with a lot of training, and we used to go. I used to go out in the dog section on nights, and we used to do hides for the dogs just to get the dogs trained up with different things and do tracks. And I went in my spare time to the kennels as well, and it was a proper lifestyle. I got onto
Mm.
the dog section three times full time. Got offered a position full time 3 times. Um, it's quite a rigorous course you've got to go through, and then you get ranked on that course. And the next job that comes up, the number one gets offered, number two gets offered, number three gets offered.
Yeah, yeah.
So each time I got an email saying, "There's a job here for you. We want you on the unit." I went to my superiors and said, "Well, the dog section want me. Can I go?" And each time they said no because I'd had time off the previous year with back issues. That maybe I'd had maybe 2 or 3 days off where it was just excruciating. Um, so they blocked my career
It's
path within the police,
it's
and
and it's so strange. It you take that sort of situation and blow it up to sort of national level. It's and this is one of the things in terms of I think what the public's opinion is of like things like the quotas and DEI quotas and stuff like that. And I think that's why it gets a lot of bad rap is the fact that the best people should be in them in the right positions. So if, for instance, like you in the police, if you're the best person for that job, regardless of whether your back's bad or you've had time off or you've fucking cut your toenails too short one day and whatever, you're the best person for the job. So it doesn't.
yeah,
Everything else should pale in comparison of that, and vice versa with any other position. And this is my view on it, and my personal view is the fact that your color of your skin, your race, your religion, everybody's got it when they fill out the forms online, and it asks you religion and it asks you your ethnicity. I always put prefer not to say, prefer not to say, prefer not to say, because that
I do.
should not come into any decision that any employer, any governmental organization, anybody should make. That information is bollocks, complete and
Yeah,
utter bollocks. Do you have the qualifications? Do you have the experience? Have you passed the exams? Have you done this? Have you done that? Are you, you know, the best person for this job, regardless of any other of the superficial
yeah,
bollocks? Yes.
yeah.
Right. Well, there you go. The job's yours. It makes sense.
They call it positive
And
discrimination, don't they? I was
yeah,
considering going in for my sergeant's exam in the police, and an email came through, and the email said something along the lines of anyone can apply if you've got more than 2 years service in. However, priority will be given to those of ethnic minorities or the certain backgrounds and things like that. And that was the actual email that came through. So they called it
wow.
positive discrimination, but basically they were telling you that if it came, to you and somebody else that might be from a minority or a different group or a different social group or structure or whatever, then chances are you ain't getting the job. When I can hand on heart say that I've worked with some very, very, very capable people in the police over the years in overt roles, in covert roles, in all kinds of departments, and I can quite honestly, hands on heart, say I would say the majority of people who got positions or promotions wouldn't have been the person that I would have chosen because I would have chosen on experience, on capability, on the things that matter really, ability to be able to do that
Yeah.
job to the best extent. But there's so much more at play these days. It's all there's a lot of other
It's that
considerations that go on.
politics. Yeah. And you know what? It's one of those where ultimately, in an ideal world, I kind of, and it comes back to what we spoke about before in terms of the fact that yes, the intention or the intent behind it might be virtuous and it might be good, but it's then understanding that in practice, and in interpretation, stuff like that doesn't work. When you and that's one of my big things. I just mentioned about religion there, and I was brought up Roman Catholic, but when it comes to religion, is what every single religion is. This is from my eyes, and this is every single religion. So you can all have a go at me. Every single one of them, including what technically is my own religion, is it's a man's interpretation. It's some person's interpretation of whatever, whether it be the Ten Commandments or Hindu Vedas or whatever it may be. That isn't, the spoken word of God or Allah or Buddha or Krishna. It's somebody's interpretation of it. And I think this is the thing with when something like the diversity, equity, inclusion, and positive discrimination, and so on and so forth takes place, it's too ambiguous to be implemented correctly. And I think I think everybody that's sort of normal moral standing would say if a person from an ethnic minority is the best person for the job and they don't get the job because of their ethnic minority, we're all opposed to that. That's wrong. That should not happen. But then when it goes the other way and swings too far the other way, that's when that's when people get pissed off, and that's when people get annoyed with it. Is because, well, no, it's the best person for the job regardless of all that others. And that's when you start bringing stuff in. When you start bringing stuff in that is superficial, it clouds the issue and clouds the actual thing at heart of it. So what did you do in the police then? What was your role? What, like, obviously we touched on it before in terms of that's what you decided. There was a split from Marines to police, and you chose the police. Was it entry level and then almost climb the ladder and whatnot, or did you have like sort of a goal in mind?
I think I was far too outspoken to climb any ladder. I don't think my application would have been considered even past the paper sift. I don't think. I certainly wasn't a yes man. And to get anywhere in the police, you needed to be a yes man or woman. But
Yeah.
I mean, everybody starts off at the same point. You do 2-year probation. So I went to a police college called Bruges, which was in Warrington, which is no longer open because the police have all taken the training into their own, in hand now, in house. But that was fantastic. That was 3 months of just carnage. You had an awful lot of work to do in 3 months. You had 3 major exams to pass, and then you went out onto division. But I mean that was studying. It was it was a bit like my uni. That was studying, exercise, and drinking, all rolled into one. And we managed to do quite a lot of it well, actually. In fact, I think this record probably would still stand. We trained that hard there. It was really, really intense. But even the physical side of things mattered then. It doesn't so much now because the bar's been dropped
Yeah.
so much. But we trained so hard. I set the police college record, and I don't know how far this spreads out for press ups in a minute as well. So I spent 3 months just non-stop training. I managed to do 98 press ups in a minute, and I was
Wow.
absolutely fuming that I didn't get the 100, but I just didn't have it in me. Um, but that gives you then the sort of base to go out into division, and then you're bog standard Bobby for 2 years. You're with a tutor, a more experienced officer, and basically they shove you in front of every situation that you need to be exposed to. So one of the first jobs I went to was in the mortuary. A woman had been hit by a car on the dual carriageway, thrown up into the air, collected by the car behind when she'd landed, thrown up into the air again. So, as a first day going into the mortuary with the brief that we needed to have a look at this, we needed to go and decide whether the family can make a formal identification or whether you think it's a bit too much. So within 2 hours of landing in the police station, I'm in the mortuary with the mortician piecing this lady's face back together on the slab.
Wow.
And he literally picked her face up off the slab and put it back on. And then he's got the.
And I
I'm like, look, I'll be honest. The family ain't seeing this. And he's like, no, wait. He said, I can make it better. So he gets this needle and thread out, and he starts to stitch this woman's face up,
oh
and she looks
god.
like she looks like Frankenstein's monster. I'm like, look,
I've
I'm
just
really.
I've just been watching. I've literally just started watching Monster, which is about the Ed Gein story. So the fact the needle and thread and sewing stuff, it's like very, very fucking vivid in my mind. But it reminds me. So my granddad was in the RAF in the Suez Canal zone. He actually swam the Suez Canal and nearly caused a fucking international incident. Like, yeah. Well,
Remind me about
he
remind me about Croatia. I've got a similar story.
uh, I will. Well, he tried to swim from one side to the other, not realizing the currents in the Suez Canal, and ended up like 3 miles down. Fucking like nearly caused it because it's a major shipping lane. Nearly caused a national incident, and he just like he laughs it off. But he went into the fire service after his 12 years in the RAF, or 7 years. I can't remember, one of the two. But he was an armament fitter in the RAF in the Suez Canal zone, which basically, for those that don't know, basically He got the almost like a cool job of like testing the guns, making sure the bombs were right, and then fitting them to the planes.
Yeah,
Like he just firing 50 cal guns all day, like dead
yeah.
good fun, proper like Rambo shit. And then when he came out of the RAF, went into the fire service, and I always remember his first. He never told a lot of stories from the fire service or the RAF. He was a very reserved, or he is a very reserved man. He's currently on bedridden. He's had a few strokes, so his memory's not quite there.
Pity.
But
Yeah,
he told me the first day on the job as a fire in the fire service, he turned up to an RTA, which for those that don't know is a road traffic accident, and very similar to yours. His first responsibility was go and find that woman's head in the field over there
yeah,
because she'd been decapitated, and this is his
yeah,
first day, and
yeah,
he's scouring a field for a lady's head.
yeah.
And there's no, obviously back then it's slightly different than it is now, but there's no sort of counselling after that. There's no sort of how are you dealing with that? Is that okay? It was just matter of fact, find this head.
Yeah. This is one of my big irks over being in the police, I think, and it comes back to what I said before. They just don't give a shit at all, or they
Mm,
didn't anyway. I've not been in for a long time, um, but being seeing things like that, fair enough. I've never run into battle and had people blown up beside me by IEDs or had bullets shot at me. Although I have been threatened with guns and chased with samurai swords and things like that. So
oh,
I've
nice.
got an idea. No, not nice. I've got an idea. But the things that you see in the emergency services are horrific, absolutely
Mm,
horrific. And when you leave, you leave. That's it. There's I've got. I can honestly say there are two things that triggers memories for me. Really, really sad memories. Brushing my teeth, which is obviously a couple of times a day. That triggers things for me, and doing dishes as well. So I kind of realised if I'm stood still in any particular position, moment, doing something, and I've got time to start thinking, these little things just pop back into your head again, and they're not pleasant
mm.
things. But
No, I
maybe that's why I keep myself so busy.
I think it's a difficult sort of. I've always obviously I've never been in the armed services. I've never been in the police, and I've seen in my time two dead bodies, both family members. I've been there when one of them's. In fact, I've been there when both of them have actually passed on. But it's never been gruesome, even though it's like quite macabre, and it is a surreal feeling. And I'm always sort of not that I'm blasé about death, but due to my spiritual practices and what I've done, I wholeheartedly believe death isn't the end. So when death is around, I'm not as sad as everybody. It doesn't sort
Mm.
of bother me because I believe that they've moved on. Yes, it is sad because they're no longer here, but they're just no longer with us.
Yeah,
They're elsewhere.
yeah,
And I think that's the appeal of religion as well. But I think the thing that's always bothered me, and I'm big on injustice. Injustice really, really triggers me to the point where it yeah. There's a program with Raphael Rowe, who is it's world's toughest prisons. I don't know whether you ever seen it. It's a really good program. But basically, he was jailed in this country for a crime he didn't commit for like 9 years.
mm.
Um, I I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you get to that point of knowing that you didn't do it and whatnot. So injustice has always been a problem for me. And the thing that I never quite can reconcile is we expect people in armed services and police force and fire service and the NHS to experience things that no human should experience, whether that be limbs blown off, friends dying, what whatever it may be. That's so even to the point of if you're in the police, you're in the armed response, and it's just happened recently, obviously in Manchester with the
Yeah,
synagogue attack. Nobody across the world has thought about the person, the police officer that fired the fucking shot, that actually took a life and got paid to do so. And
yeah,
everybody sort of and rightly so, talking about the victims, and then because the media sensationalize stuff, talk about the perpetrator. Not one fucking word is mentioned about the police officer, whoever it may be, that actually had
yeah,
to shoot somebody.
yeah,
um and that, we're asking these people to do abhorrent things, which it is. it's
yeah,
it's it's ingrained in us not to take a life,
yeah,
a human life, so to speak. But then it's just expected,
yeah.
and there's no, and then people wonder what the problem is after that.
Yeah, the issue I have with that, and when I saw that, obviously your first thought is for the victims, but immediately I was thinking that poor bastard that shot him.
Mm,
Um, I don't think the public realise just how you get hung out to dry in that situation. When you're under
mm,
investigation, you almost get treated like you have committed murder. And my first
mm.
thought was that poor bastard and his family has got years now of uncertainty as to whether he's going to get prosecuted for that. And that's how it is. So he'll be suspended, his clothes will be seized, he'll have nail
Wow.
scrapings done, he'll probably have his fingerprints taken. There'll be interview after interview. He'll be, he won't work for probably the best part of 2 years while an investigation goes, and he won't know in that time whether he's going to get prosecuted for murder or not. So, you've got mental health issues at play there. You've got, um, I worked with two guys who chased a car thief up onto dual carriageway, and the car thief got knocked over and killed. And they were literally doing their job. They were trying to catch a criminal. They were put through the ringer for 2 years, and one case against them, and I'm going to say against them because it was, um, collapsed, so that it all started all over again. And so they
Oh
they
God.
had to go they had to go through. You are rinsed. You're not supported, or you weren't then anyway. Whether it's different now, I don't know. But it's not just having to live with that and not having any being given any management techniques for seeing what you see. It's the fact that if you do something actively like that, then you become a target for an investigation, which is just. I get that they've got to
It's
gather evidence and they've got to, find
course
out.
they do. But it's got to be, and this is the thing. It's probably somebody in a position that's made this process or come up with this process that has never touched a gun, never had to face a life or
Yeah,
death moment. And it's different. I listen to quite a lot of podcasts, and I listen to sort of a lot of them sort of American, and it's a different sort of culture over there with guns and whatnot. But there was one. with Joe Rogan and Paul Stamets, and he was talking about the benefits of MDMA and psilocybin treating sort of PTSD within police officers,
Mhm.
because in the States they I think the analogy you used was basically they pull over hundreds of people per week, hundreds of people they pull over in the car, and every single time they never know this
Yeah,
could be it, this could
yeah,
be gun out the window, dead. And
yeah,
when people actually put it in perspective and put it in context, everybody would probably behave the exact fucking same way. And
yeah.
I couldn't imagine. I'll tell you, harking back to my time in Africa, because obviously it's a different sort of world completely. But I was held at AK-47 gunpoint by armed forces when I was crossing from Zambia to Botswana and it's a river called Zambezi River, and the place is called Kasangula. And on the way there, you get warned that there is scammers, as there is everywhere at tourist spots. It's free. The ferry crossing is free. It just runs back and forth. It's no longer than 200-300 yards, or 200-300 meters. And on the way back, I presumed wrongly that it was free, because obviously that's what I got told. Now it's free on the way there from Botswana to Zambia, but on the way back, they charge you, and it was something equivalent of like 40 pence. It wasn't like fucking break the bank stuff. But when the guy came up to ask, I was like, "Yeah, go away, you're scamming this, that, the other." And he came back with some Zambian armed forces guys, red berets, full camo, AK-47, pointed at my face. Now, anybody that's listening to this that thinks, "Oh, well, I wouldn't take that," bullshit. You're lying, because I froze and probably nearly shit and pissed myself, to the point where it was like, and it might not have been loaded, and it might have just been a show of force. But when you're faced with that mortality, the
You can
first
have my
thing I'll
40p.
yeah, take 80 pence,
Yeah.
take the full lot. I'm not bothered. And it's
Yeah,
just, we're expecting these police officers and whoever it be, even fire service people so you're expecting a fireman to run into a blazing building or a blazing fire and deal with the fact and that decision of shit, this could be it. And especially from a police officer's aspect, because with a fire, it's all down in essence to that one that you've not got to watch out or figure out what the fire's thinking, or figure
yeah,
out whether the fire's going to burn you, because it's the variables are a lot less. Whereas
yeah,
with a police officer that you know for instance, let's take the synagogue attack in Manchester. There's so many variables for that officer that fired that gun to take into account. Is the fact that you know is this the actual guy? Is this the
yeah,
perpetrator? Is this the person that's done this? Two, shit, there's public here. Is
yeah,
he? If it is that guy, does he have an accomplice? Does he have people here that and that list goes on. You could
yeah,
there was comment that he had maybe have had a device on him. Right? Well, if he's got one device, does he have two, three devices? Fuck, I'm stood next to parked cars. Is it in one of these cars? And
mm,
and that sort of mental strain to put somebody through, and then for the police to then almost cast them aside in terms of, right, well, yeah, you did your job, you did the best you possibly could in that position, but we're going to have to, that 2 years is a long ass time, a very
yeah,
long time.
yeah.
And surely something like that can be done within months,
You would hope
probably.
so. You would hope so. But even months is a long time. But it's just the anguish right the way
Yeah,
throughout. And your mind shouldn't be on, am I going to get prosecuted if I pull the trigger? It should be on the job in hand, and that's that. But I can
yeah,
tell you from experience, it is. We had we got notification from the neighbouring force that somebody had been kidnapped. They'd been stuffed into a white van and they were coming our way on a dual carriageway. So I was like, right, okay. So I was free. So I went up onto a flyover and I was watching, the cars and vans go underneath. And this was, I don't know, probably 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Um, so anyway, white van came underneath, kind of matched the description. So I dropped down onto the dual carriageway, came up behind it, pulled it over. Guy got out. Builder just going using the van as a sort of car. But as I was talking to him at the roadside, a white van went past. I thought, that's it.
Yeah.
So I got back in the car. As soon as I took off, it clearly started driving erratically, and I was behind it. So. Um, Long story short, we had a car chase. It was going through villages, through towns, through the countryside. I was lead car for, I'd say, 90% of it. While we had arm response coming from different areas, dogs coming, helicopters, well, fixed wing it was then actually the plane. Um, and I was behind this car, and we were doing in excess of the speed limit. But all the time, you're like, can I justify this? Can I justify this? You're giving a commentary over the radio. I'm doing 110 in a 60. Can I justify this if something goes wrong? And all the time, you're thinking justify, justify. You're not actually thinking about what you should be doing.
What you
So
should be. Yeah.
yeah. So going along an A road, there was one of the back doors opened, and there was like a 5 foot iron bar thrown out, which was coming end over end towards my car. So I'm having to sort of
Nice.
drop back a little bit and dodge. Then I had still saw blades being thrown at the car as well. While we're doing probably about 90 miles an hour. So I'm just waiting for one of those to come through the windscreen at me at that point. There were numerous bags of white powder being launched out, so I was driving through puffs of clouds of white powder. So, and the guy behind me who had joined in on the chase, can't say I liked him all that much anyway. But bear in mind, these guys were violent criminals in this car, and there was me single crewed in my car and him. Um,
Mm.
we were driving through some villages at pretty high speeds, and he backed off and left me to it with these guys because he was scared that he was going to get prosecuted for driving too fast in the built-up area. So
Wow.
it was it was me behind this car um, on my own, and if they'd have stopped, I'd have been in big trouble. So we, thankfully the pursuit carried on until we had traffic cars there, firearms cars there, dog section there, and when it was stopped, it came to a stop and it got stung. And but just that mentality of him behind me, he stabbed my back. I would
Yeah.
have his back. But to actually drop off and disappear, his headlights get smaller and smaller in my mirrors because he's scared of being prosecuted rather than actually catching
Which
these, saving somebody's life
yeah,
and catching these dangerous criminals. It's bizarre.
which at that point you should like, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, and with Alex Honnold is um that within sort of extreme sports, because it is in essence extreme, you have to be completely dialed in and focused. Otherwise, if you don't, you've got a very fucking high chance of dying.
Yeah,
Um, and it's the same sort of premise in terms of in that situation that you were in. You don't need all this other noise. You don't need all this other bollocks
yeah,
and things going on and cogs turning your head. You need to be focused purely on the situation to ultimately make the right decision. So it's,
yeah,
I kind of, I empathize in terms of the rule makers and lawbreakers and whatever they may be. But at the same time, until you've been in that situation, and this comes to the crux of it, is consult people that have been in that situation. Consult people that
correct.
have experienced that. They will tell you they will 100% tell you the best way to structure things. Now, obviously, I think speaking to you and understanding where you're coming from, you're not saying carte blanche, do what you want, because there is, and there always is within every sort of profession, the odd bad apple that will take it too
Yeah,
far and do what they want.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
we've all. we've all seen what's the freaking program called where Bent Bastards. I can't remember what it's called. With we always watch it. Me and Mrs. I can't remember. But we've always seen the it's been highlighted as police corruption. It's been highlighted as this, and there's corruption throughout. I mean, you look at the members of parliament that come out with multi-million pounds in the pockets, thinking, "Well, you only get 100 grand a year, so how the fuck have you made like 2 million?"
Yeah,
When we're all not naive to think that won't or takes place, which is, I understand there needs to be a structure in place, but what that disconnect is the fact that nobody seems to be consulting the people that are actually doing it to
yeah,
understand
with the
how to
experience,
construct the structure that yeah and that's it.
and it's just,
If somebody
it's it's exactly the same in Parliament now. When we go in there and we see legislation that is going to be harmful to rural UK, we say, well, look, we represent the land managers, the gamekeepers, the landowners, the farmers,
yeah
everybody that works the land, and their grandparents and great grandparents have worked the land for centuries. This is the experience we're bringing, and we're saying this, but you get ignored. It's the wrong people making the
yeah
wrong decisions.
And don't get me. Even then, I'd go a step too far. Then people can make the decisions. They're just consulting the wrong people in
Mm.
formulating the structures and systems in place. You know, the I was just about to mention, like, if I was going skydiving and if I was going base jumping, I wouldn't get a fucking flute player to teach me how to do it.
Yeah,
Y-
yeah.
I
You mean
I'd be
you make
getting
you make
somebody that's been there, done that.
yeah, or somebody that's actually read books about skydiving. That's not going to be the person to teach you, is it?
No, exactly. You need somebody that's experienced the fact that when, like, I say it to um or Nick. In fact, let's do it the other way. So my partner, she's been playing hockey since she was 10 year old. I've only recently started, like in the past 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it may be. I've dabbled a little bit in the past few years, but she can teach me properly, as can other
Yeah,
people, because they know what it feels like. When you hold your stick like this and you feel that urge to do
yeah,
this, then don't do
yeah,
that. Do it this way. Whereas somebody that's read a book about hockey might be able to tell me that, but they can't tell me how it feels. They can't tell
yeah,
me, oh, when you're in this situation in this part of the pitch, you'll want the urge to do this. Don't do that. And it's
yeah,
vice versa with everything else. Like, and coming back to, I think if everybody sort of took that mantra in, whether it be in the police, whether it be in the fire service, the NHS, you know, speak. And a lot of my family have worked in the NHS all their life. Is the fact that they get so frustrated that rules and regulations come top down without
mm,
consultation of the
yeah,
you know we've all been in that position. In fact, I challenge every single person that's listening to this. You're all in a position where rules and regulations in on paper, yeah, kind of agree with, but in practice, it doesn't fucking. You can't do it that way because
yeah,
in practical terms, the chicken comes before the egg, and blah 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 blah. Um, and nobody seems to be wanting to willing to open up that channel of dialogue
yeah,
because I think maybe because it might be seen as a sign of them being incompetent or them being unworthy or not in the right position. But I show it as a sign of strength, and it's a sign
yeah.
of true leadership.
Hey, I completely agree. I mean, having done, I'm a sort of leader within my organisation now, and I've generally usually had positions of leadership, and I couldn't agree more. I don't talk about I talk about we. You've got to draw on the strength of
Mm.
your team to be able to be successful as a unit. And those people who, let's say, are in Parliament need to be listening to other people to be able to make effective legislation. And it's just, I can't abide somebody who talks about I did this, I did that. It's we, or it should be we.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
Should be.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the
no one
operative
person
word.
knows everything. Yeah.
And so harken it back to, well, it kind of sort of encompasses, and I want to sort of finish with this, is when, in regards to outdoors, and obviously I've looked through a lot of your content, and um and even in the police force and armed services, I've seen it, and my granddad talks about his pals in the RF and his pals in the fire service with, in fact, because he gets confused now. I think he was tunneling through the wall next door because he thought he was in some trench somewhere and he needed to save one of his pals the other
Bloody
day. And
hell.
you got to kind of remind him. But it's one of those where that and it ties in with, I was speaking to a gentleman called Jackson the other day, who's a modern masculinity coach. That brotherhood and that camaraderie, um, that how important is that? I know from personal experience that support network out in the wilderness and adventuring is so important, because if you get in trouble, you've got somebody that
Yeah.
can either go and get help or can help you. If you're on your own,
Yeah.
you're on your fucking own. How important would you say that is for
I
one,
think
for
it's
a man,
yeah.
and two, for everybody really?
Support network is probably one of the most important things you need now. Whether that's where adventures are concerned, your career, your life, you need a support network, because I think men's mental health now is really more open than it ever has been. I think people are beginning to understand what the average bloke goes through, puts up with, and actually doesn't say anything. I've got a very good friend of mine. I used to hunt with in France every year. He's been over here hunting with me as well. He was a police officer in France. So we were at the Christmas market when the terrorist opened fire, and
Oh
and
wow.
shot and stabbed people and things like that. And he basically got called into work, and it was him and his team that eventually shot this guy. So we had no idea he was suffering in silence, and ultimately 2 years ago he ended his own life. um,
Oh,
so you're talking about support network. It's it's key. It's absolute key. Now this is either the mental health or when you're out in the field, and you really need, if you're in somewhere hunkered down in bad weather, you need people around you that know what they're doing as well. And brotherhood, I think brotherhood, you'd think that the police would be very similar to the armed forces, but I didn't find that. I thought the
mm,
police were very much on an individual basis, a um, one up kind of scenario, where I think it's a very different kind of person that goes into the police. They're very much out for themselves, in my experience, and you don't form the relationships that you perhaps would if you're in the military. I've got friends and family that have been in the
yeah.
military who have that. So I formed my sort of inner circle, as I said before, outside of that, and I've got a hand. I could count on one hand now the amount of people who I could phone up, at 2 o'clock in the morning, say bring a shovel and some duct tape, and they wouldn't ask questions.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I going back to the whole sort of the therapeutic benefit of being out in nature, and being amongst sort of your brotherhood or your support network in the wild and in nature. There's very little, I think, in a clinical setting that could even trump or compare to that sort of getting out and about. And yeah, I mean, I'll say I know when I've been through difficult times, there's a piece of woodland that's near me. It's probably about 20 minutes away, and there's one specific tree. And this sounds daft when I say it out loud, but there's one tree, and whenever I see that tree, and it must be 6, 7, 800 years old. It's a huge, massive tree. All the roots are kind of exposed and gnarly, and And whenever I see that tree, I can sit down and I can sit next to it, and it just sort of calms me to the point where it's like, look,
Yeah.
you know, I can get through this and I can get through that, and that's not that bad. And it shifts that sort of perspective, and
Yeah.
it kind of just helps me carry on that little bit more
Yeah.
rather than sort of giving up or whatever. So yeah, I think what you're doing is awesome. I think the way that we need to sort of progress forward as a society in terms of understanding the role hunting, culling, wildlife and game management, or countryside management is integral to um, this part of the world, and especially to the UK. And only people like yourself that educate, and honestly, I'll be pushing everybody towards your YouTube channel, because in terms of that education and understanding that all this stuff can be done relatively, like I look, the Lake District is 40 minutes away from me, and you can go on any walk there whatsoever. Like I say, even cat bells, which I now determined is a bit of a shit one in the Lake District, it's
I've done
still
cat
amazing.
bells. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. I think everybody will have done it because it is a relatively easy one. But we are so lucky that we have so many different diverse sort of biospheres within this country.
Yeah.
We have, there's a beach near where Seb lives called Gwynfor Beach, which is like the Caribbean. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous sands. You could be anywhere in the world in summer. Outer Hebrides, white sands. It looks like the Caribbean, although
Yeah.
you fucking bring a coat. Like,
Yeah.
we are so lucky to have all this. It's so important that people like yourself educate the population on how to best manage and look after it so that we preserve it, rather than
Yeah.
just keep on walking blindly and just start destroying it.
Yeah. It's getting out and enjoying it. These places are there to be enjoyed, but there are also those people who look after them so other people can go and enjoy them. And it's what those people do and the experience they bring that really matters. And that's part of my day job, is to try to make sure that policy comes about that isn't harmful to the places that matters to us, and it gives it some longevity so people can enjoy it for decades to come.
Well, keep fighting that fight. I'll be supporting you and I'll shout in your corner. So, if people want to find out a little bit more about you and what you do, and your YouTube channel and so on and so forth, so it's West Capades.
Westcapades, yeah. So there's an underscore West underscore Capades. So I've got plenty of stuff on Instagram which you might find interesting to have a look at. My YouTube itself is going to be kicking off on the 21st of October. So I've got. There are going to be so many different films in there. It's not just going to be hunting and shooting and fishing and things like that. I'm a bushcraft instructor by trade as well. I love being out in the outdoors, camping and kayaking, and maybe skydiving again one day. And so it's a channel for adventure lovers, really. But also, when
Yeah.
I am hunting, I'm explaining about what I'm doing, why we hunt, how we hunt, the methods, the techniques. So I would like to try and give a little bit of education as well along the journey. But yeah, there's a little bit of everything on there. If you like the outdoors, I'm hoping you'd like the channel.
Yeah, I think it's that education through exposure, which I think helps tenfold. I mean, one of the biggest things with hunting, like you just mentioned, Meat Eater with Steve Rinella.
Oh
I,
yeah,
I
top guy.
that was my almost yeah, that was my almost my first educational view into hunting,
Yeah,
and he does it so well.
yeah,
Where there's full episodes where he'll go out and he won't kill a thing because
it happens.
it
Yeah,
wasn't good enough that day, and that's part and
yeah.
parcel. So yeah, I think that education through exposure is a big thing. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and I'd love to have you back on in future, Jake. And yeah, thank you very much. See you later,
May
everybody.
may I
Oh,
thank
go
my
on.
my guys just before we head away?
Of course you can.
But I genuinely couldn't do I said before I'm a technophobe. So GD Media, Gareth Davis Media is doing my editing and quite a lot of my filming, actually. So I drag him around the forest with his team as well. Swarovski Optic supply some of the best optical vision, whether you're bird watching, binoculars, rifle scopes, anything like that. You don't get much better than them. Green olive firewood. Now you'll see in the videos that I do quite a lot of catch and cooks, bit of butchery, field butchery. So I'm often on a beach, cooking food. Green olive firewood supply my firewood and coals, and it's all really, really top-notch stuff. Bushwear as well. They one of the biggest outdoor retailers in Europe, and Flint Clothing as well. So without these
I can
guys,
testify to
I
Flint
could not.
clothing. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't put all this together without them. So it's a we, it's not an I. So have a look at the channel. Do subscribe to my YouTube. It's brand new. It's getting off the ground, and it would do me an enormous favor and help me along if you hit the like and subscribe.
Awesome, brother. Thank you very much. See you later, everybody.
Cheers.